I just want people to know how much fun we have down here, what there is for opportunity.
I heard Ranella talk about Coues deer hunting, and he's like, I just don't understand why more people aren't here hunting these deer. Yep. Because they're awesome.
So if I come back with a rifle, are you going to think any less of me?
I'm coming back with a rifle with you.
We talked about what's affecting mule deer populations.
In our part of the world, everyone says it's the wolves.
People are too quick to label predators as the issue, and they're the most obvious thing, but it's much more complex than that. We've got, like I've talked about, the fire suppression is a huge issue.
Unbeknownst to me, that Coatimundi is like probably 25, 30 yards away. It starts growling like, we ate him today. Hank Shaw cooked him.
When you shot that thing and we smelled it, I'm like, whoo, boy, we're really going to eat this thing. It's a good thing we got Hank Shaw here, because if I had to cook it, it'd taste worse than it smells.
And so we developed this junior jackrabbit camp, take them out jackrabbit hunting Saturday morning. So you're teaching the kids how to walk slowly, shoot the rabbit. We skin the rabbits. You don't take the guts out. I tell the kids the guts are icky. You don't want to go in there. So the kids learn how to process an elk. And so Saturday night, we feast on jackrabbit stew.
All right, we're recording here. This is an interesting podcast. If you watch Christmas Story with Ralphie and the neighbor's dog, the Bumpfuses, we got the Bumpfuses out behind the place we're staying here. Mm-hmm. And this is a joint podcast put on by two Leupold guys. Can I say that, Brian?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So Brian Call, who is the Gritty Bowman, we're not sure whose podcast this really is. Is it the Gritty Bowman or is it Hunt Talk Radio?
It's kind of a marriage between the two. For one night only. Is that like a one-night stand?
That's a one-night stand. There you go,
Gritty
Brian.
Talk Radio.
Oh, God.
Gritty Talk Radio.
Gritty Talk Radio. The Hunt Bowman. Yeah, the Gritty Talk Radio is way better, Jim. And we are joined here in southern Arizona by Jim Heffelfinger, who is, well, he's like the deer man, the authority on all things deer-related. Brian and I have been waiting for you to show up, Jim.
Yep.
We spent so much time today talking about you, waiting for you to be here, that we almost ran out of things to do until a Coatimundi came running across the rock pile.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Brian,
gods were smiling on me today.
Yeah, because yesterday Brian got attacked by one.
Yeah. Have you ever been charged by a Coatimundi?
I have not.
Well, it's a little intimidating.
I didn't know it was possible.
Yeah, well, I had come on this buck, right?
A Coues buck.
A Coues buck. I had seen him disappear, and I had seen the monkey thing disappear as well into the same tall grass around this corner. I get over there, and the plan was to, kill the buck. Buck sees me before I see it. It's the story of this whole week. And,
I've heard that story.
He's about 30 yards away, and he just blows and just starts bouncing away. So I do the little, trying to get him to stop. I've noticed that grunting doesn't do anything. It just causes him to go faster. He doesn't stop then, and so I'm like, just, I don't know,
some kind of
something,
noise, right?
to get him to go, what? Well, wait a minute, what was that? These deer are not curious enough. You're going to have to explain this to me, how they differ from mule deer, because that works all the time on mule deer. And so, anyway, as I'm doing this sound, this kind of wounded rabbit kind of sound, unbeknownst to me, that Coatimundi is like probably 25, 30 yards away and in the tall grass. But I don't notice him. I mean, he just appears in the grass about 20 yards, and he's like charging through the grass. And all I see is like this tail sticking up and like the grass parting as it comes at me. And then when then it gets like to 12 yards, and I can see the mask on the face. And it looks like a bandit, like some kind of.
It does.
And the thing is, it starts growling like, and it's aggressive. And so I'm like, wait a minute. And it charges through the grass, stops at 12 yards. I'm trying to get the bow to full draw after I stumble backwards, and it chums at me again and stops at 8 yards. Now the bow's back, and I'm feeling very confident now. I get the pin settled, Anyway, I missed the thing, and we'll just brush over that. And
Quaddy fever.
yeah, and I actually had my slider sight slid to the wrong dial because I had shot at that said buck earlier and missed him. So anyway, and I forgot to reset the sight. I missed the quaddy. He runs off, and I chase him.
Yeah.
I chased him all the way to where we found him today. Like I ran like 120, 50 yards. I was a little upset. I was like, I wonder how far he'll run. He was out in the grasslands,
Yeah.
and I was on his tail. I mean, I thought I'd catch up, but I didn't. So that was the story. Today I had redemption, and I got the little one of those little guys today, and we ate him today. Hank Shaw cooked him. What'd you think, Jim?
I thought it was good.
Yeah,
It was really good.
I could not believe it when you shot that thing and we smelled it. I'm like, whoo, boy, we're really gonna eat this thing. It's a good thing we got Hank Shaw here, because if I had to cook it, it'd taste worse than it smells.
It smelled like a bear.
I think I benefited from not being here at that.
Yeah, you did,
I
Jim.
just walked in, see it on the plate. It
Smelled
good.
But Hank said that when you rinse them off and clean them, that the odor should come
There was
off.
meat under there.
Yeah, and if the meat still smells like it did, even though you've got it all off and clean, then that flavor is kind of in the meat. But as soon as I got the skin off and cleaned it all up, gutted it and rinsed it, it smelled great. It looked like pork, and it actually tastes like pork. Mm-hmm. So we had barbecue pork tonight.
Yeah. So Jim, what Brian is trying to do here, he's trying to create a new tag sale for Arizona Game and Fish.
We're going to have to start limiting.
Yeah, limited entry Coatimundi.
Uh-huh.
I bet
But also, we need to teach people how to do that mating call that you were doing.
is that what it
I
is?
think it was a mating call.
Mating
Okay.
call. Perhaps. He was definitely aggressive.
Do you know what time of year they breed?
They tend to be. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Because today when we found him, you saw that really big male again. And I went, Brian's like, you go after him, Randy, because I've been dreaming about shooting a Coatimundi. And so I go over there, and there's a dozen little ones there. And they just take off, and we'd lose them. And then Brian's on the other ridge, and he's over there shucking and dancing and jiving, holding his bow up like Tarzan. He shot one. I'm like, how in the hell?
Yeah.
But anyhow,
Troops.
we were thinking about all the things to talk about with the deer master while we were interrupted rudely by a Coatimundi attack or passing, whatever
Sorry
we
about
call
that.
it.
Just
So
a little
I think
tangent.
those big males may not taste quite as well.
Maybe.
I would bet that would be. That's a
The
good
males get
point.
big, they get darker, and then they can become solitary when they get older. They'll be off by themselves. And not
Well, this one that attacked was giant.
Yeah.
He was a Boone and Crockett Coatimundi without a doubt. He's a big dude.
So since we've talked about something that we had, Brian had success shooting, maybe we should talk about the things that Jim's an expert in that seem to be frustrating us. We've been here, what is this, day 5?
Yeah.
5 days.
Those are long days when you're out there glassing.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe we can talk about how to pronounce it.
There, that's okay.
Cows.
Yeah. Have you ever used
Jonathan explained to me.
Okay.
It is cows, like COWS.
Yeah. And last year when I was here, we had Jonathan Odell from Arizona Game and Fish. And he's like, well, it's named after Elliott Coues.
Cows.
And even though all the locals call it Coues deer, it's really cows. And I went home and I did all this research on Elliott Coues. And I'm like, wow, Jonathan, he's right.
Yeah.
Well, I started using the term interchangeably. Your local Coues deer nuts down here?
Yeah, they don't like it, do they?
No.
You northerner, you stupid idiot, Newberg, you don't know your butt from a hole.
When in Rome,
Yeah.
I just
there you go.
I just say
Well,
Coues.
about once a month, the Facebook post will blow up. And people
Oh, really?
And I'll usually chime in and say, I've talked to a great uncle of Elliott Coues, and he said, yeah, Elliott. We all know about Elliott, our famous great uncle, and he was Army surgeon and had things named after him. And I said, well, how do you pronounce your last name? It's Coues. And I said, like Cows, not like Couse. and not like Coues? No, it's Coues. It's always been Coues. So the deer is named after Elliot Coues. It's Coues deer with an apostrophe, and so it's Coues. But when people on the internet insist that it's Coues, I don't ever correct anybody. I don't care.
I prefer to call it the son of a or
Son of an army surgeon.
that's right.
I picture these two guys sitting in the cafe dressed in camouflage and talking loudly about all the cows that they killed over the years. I would rather pronounce it Coues, and when people use Coues, I don't ever correct them. But when someone says it's supposed to be Coues, well, it's just patently false. It's supposed to be It's supposed to be cows, and you can pronounce it any way you want it.
Well, there you have it, folks. We have the man, the expert, all things Western deer right here, who has just verified that the next one of you who light me up for using the term cows, I am entitled to come and put sugar in your gas tank.
I have several memes that I just keep on my phone, and then when one of those blow up,
oh, there you go.
I sent you one.
Yeah, yeah, you did. So Jim works. Tell us what you do, Jim, so I don't mess it up.
I've been with the Arizona Game and Fish Department for 26 years, and the first 22 and a half years were the regional biologist for this region, southeastern Arizona. So managed the cows, whitetail, desert mule deer, led the restoration of Gould's turkeys back into southeastern Arizona, 3 species of quail, and bears and lions and pronghorn and bighorn. So pretty exciting job for 23 years. And I've always been real involved in issues that are bigger than the southeastern Arizona. Chaired the mule deer working group for about 12 years now, which is we could talk about a big Western group, and
we are going to talk about that.
Yeah, I've been involved in a lot of kind of science related things for the department, provided a lot of science support for the department, and at some point my department really needed me to get more involved in Mexican wolf recovery and some science-related things. And so we just established a position called Wildlife Science Coordinator, which I have now, which is a statewide position, but I still live in Tucson. And I provide scientific support for the department to make sure that we've got a good scientific foundation and underpinnings to the decisions and the policies we make.
Big job.
That's pretty,
for a long time.
Yeah. Did you sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night?
I've actually used that beginning to give talks when I give talks.
I don't. Maybe you remember the commercial, Brian, but my camera guys, I think, are too young to remember the commercial.
And it wasn't that long ago.
I know. I'm like, I'll say certain things, and people are like, "Huh? Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm old." All there is to it.
Yeah, it's happening. Look at this gray.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's coming in strong. I'm 43.
I got you by 10 years. We never ask guests how old they are, but I know Jim has 4 sons.
But I'm the same age as you are.
Oh.
64. Born in September birth.
November.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm older than you.
Yeah, you got me by a couple months.
So, Jim, I'm super. I want to know about these Coues deer. They're starting to get me a little itchy. And they're hard to kill.
They are
super hard to sneak up on. Super alert. They seem just so like their senses are so tuned.
They are. I mean, you really have to hunt differently than hunting mule deer. And I love to hunt mule deer. I prefer hunting mule deer. And some of my whitetail hunting friends say, "When are you going to take the training wheels off and start hunting cows?"
Well. That sounds so funny, like domestic cows.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know it. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, when you go up to a glassing point, you've got to get there 15 minutes before it starts getting light, and you're sitting there in the dark and you're quiet, so you're not disturbing anything. And then the whole canyon kind of lights up and comes alive, and you're just sitting there as like a rock. Whereas you're hunting javelina, any other species like that, you don't have to be so sensitive, but. Boy, with cows whitetail, you got to be on your game.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed is we're having. I haven't seen very many bucks, and it is the rut, and we see some 2-year-old bucks probably, maybe 3, out rutting does. The first day we got here, we saw a number of big bucks.
It's not for lack of mature bucks in here. I ran a deer check station right up the road. If you go west from where we're at now, up 283, it drains these 3 game management units, 36A, B, and C. And for 15 years, I ran a check station there and aged every buck that came out of there. And year after year, on the average, you'd have at least a third of the bucks that were 3 years old and older. Good, mature, heavy horn. 3 points. We call 3 points. Eastern count 8 point. And so year after year, that age structure holds out because of the terrain and the ruggedness and how much country there is away from roads. There's plenty of what we call security habitat to maintain an older age structure where you can't overexploit them like you could in a woodlot area in Wisconsin or in Illinois. There's just enough areas for them to get out away from hunters, and there's enough hunters that don't go very far away from the roads that the age structure's here. It's just a matter of whether you're seeing them or not, how much roading activity there is. But it's not like we've only got 1 and 2 year olds in this area. This area's got some mature bucks.
Well, we've seen a few big ones on that first day, like 4.
Yeah.
And then, but since then, it's like we saw them all in one day.
Yeah, the heat's not helping you either. It's close to 80 degrees for a
Yeah,
high
it's
this
been
week.
hot.
So they're going to be bedded down like right away.
Well, I have concluded seeing one and getting within shooting range aren't even on the same page yet. Seeing one is like the first page of the book War and Peace. Getting within shooting range is like the last page of the book.
I got to 40 yards on that buck. Now, there's some things that need to happen in order for me to get into that range. There needs to be a little bit of wind to kind of cover my sound. It's got 15 miles per hour, maybe a little more, something in that range. There needs to be, some cover. I've got to go in stocking feet, pretty much. I mean, it's almost impossible.
Not easy in this country.
Which is not easy because of the cactus.
Sticks you, stabs you, and bites you around
And so, but I was able to, in this area, yesterday, there surprisingly were very few cactus. I'm not sure why. And so I went barefoot, just with my socks all the way through. And I was able to get to 40 yards on this buck. Had some good wind to cover a little bit of the approach. But he was rutting this doe hard, a 3x3 buck. And I couldn't get him to hold still. And he zigzagged back and forth a few times. And then the doe bolted and he followed. But that's the closest I've been able to get.
Indy cow's whitetail with a bow is a trophy. It's just, they're hard.
Do you think we're crazy to spot and stock these? I mean, it appears
that's
that
the way
most
to do it.
everybody is telling me, "Oh, you should go sit water. You should go sit water."
Yeah,
but
and
I
it
don't
is
have the
dry.
fortitude. I appreciate people who can do that, but I'm not one of them.
I like to ambush hunt. I like to sit for hours on end all day
It
long.
could be effective now as dry as it is. It's really dry around here. It could be effective, but it's fun getting up and just looking over a couple square miles. If you can get up that high, it's hard to in this country because it's more rolling and skeet. But if you can get up and see all that country, I think the biggest thing that the biggest shortfall people spot and stalk and glassing is simply the concentration of each frame of the binoculars. So you've got binoculars, you got to have them on a tripod. And you view and you clear that view in the binoculars. So you make sure there's no deer in there. And then you move binoculars over one frame and you make sure there's no deer in there. And you keep going, you go down the row and you come back and forth and back and forth.
Grid search it.
And so people grid the country like that and they say, well, there's no deer. I think the biggest fault that people run into is not really clearing each frame. They look, no obvious deer, and they move it over, no obvious deer. They need to look for ears. And they need to look for a little movement. They need to really focus and concentrate on each frame. And I think people are a little too lax about their concentration. I think that's one of the biggest things.
For sure. I mean, we could talk glassing for hours. There are times where, you'll sit down, it's 2 guys. One will spot deer in the same canyon, deer, and the other guy won't see any. And you can point them out and tell them they're right here, over here, right here, right here, and they still won't see them. So it's something you got to get used to. You get a game eye. I think you practice, but having it's a different ball game when they're mounted to a tripod and you're just looking through them without touching them, and you can see that movement.
Yeah.
But I found, right now they're rutting, and you'll see a deer in the open. And a second later, it's not.
Yeah, they're moving more. They're not just sitting there.
And it'll be in the open, and it'll be not. And we're seeing, Sam and I have been seeing 50 to 60 deer a day. That's no lie, no joke. I mean, we're just seeing deer everywhere. We're just not seeing bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So where are they?
Yeah, the older bucks certainly are not going to be as active.
Even young bucks, we're not seeing very many.
Yeah.
Maybe a forked horn, or you can see a one or two young dumb bucks here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But we're just not seeing like the vast majority of deer we see are does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the does will be out, and they don't care so much. They're out feeding later, and they get up earlier in the afternoon, 3 o'clock usually. They're popping up, whereas the bucks are waiting a little bit later. And so I wrote an article once called "Where the Boys Are," and it addressed that particular thing about hunters complaining about seeing nothing but does. And in the case of people that are looking for smaller bucks, a lot of cases people miss antlers, and they don't want to hear that. People hate that when you tell them that some of those deer you're seeing might have small antlers, especially with the mule deer ears that are going to cover a yearling. So a lot of people that are out just happy to get a spike, they're looking at it and they're just nothing but ears, and they're not looking close enough. And there are younger bucks in there if they're interested, and that's one of the reasons for that. But
yeah,
we've had to behave differently than does.
We've had to throw a spotter on virtually every doe.
Yeah,
to check.
Yeah.
I had a case where I found a group of deer out. It was the last afternoon I was going to hunt, and so it was more than a mile away. So I said, well, I got nothing to lose. It's the last afternoon. Let me go see if there's a little buck in there. And I walked all the way out there, and I got in close to him, and there was about 14 does, and I took my binoculars, and I just went head to head to head to head. They're all does and fawns. And then I'd go back, they're all does and fawns, and I'd recheck them. About the 6th time I was checking the same group of does just standing there, there was a spike. A little goofy little 2x2, but it was more like a yearling spike, and he was in there all along, and I missed it 5 times. Yeah. So when I tell people, you've really got to look close. They say, yeah, I know they were all does. I look close, but they're missing some antlers, some smaller antlers.
Well, my goal in this hunt is to shoot a Sonoran dick.
Yeah, exactly.
Your little spike bucks have like 2-inch spikes. They look like those. Where are dicks native to? Africa?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
we call them 4x4s. They're 4 inches tall and 4 inches apart.
Well, that's where my standards are right now. I want to create a new enthusiasm for hunting the Sonoran dick.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'm going to pull it off. I got within 40 yards, not yesterday, the day before. And yeah,
I'll send you my article called "The Glorious Spike." It was in Deer and Deer Hunting magazine, and I celebrate how awesome a spike is.
Yeah.
And the last sentence in the article is never apologize for a spike.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is normally when I hunt other deer species, the spike is generally so dumb that it's an easy kill. Like in general, like you can get a spike, especially a spike elk. Man, those things are dumber than rocks.
In the rut.
And especially during the rut, it's like, what? Yeah, but and I've hunted mule deer, young mule deer and stuff, young whitetail bucks even. But these Coues deer, these young ones, even they are switched on. Even they are like alert and paying attention. So. What's the story on the Coues deer? Like, what's its evolution?
Yeah, so it was originally named as a different species. So we had Oticolus virginianus, which is the white-tailed deer you have all over the country, and then it was first named in southeastern Arizona, actually not far from here, where the type specimen was collected, and it was named Cervus mexicanus, like a Mexican, it's a separate deer. And then a guy named Rothrock, which was another army surgeon like Coues, came along about 15 years later and realized that it's just a subspecies of the eastern whitetail, and that's all it is. It's a smaller southwestern version of white-tailed deer, and so he correctly named it Oticolus virginianus cousii, which is just a subspecies or a local variation, and he named it after Elliott Coues because of all the naturalist stuff that he had done.
So has anyone ever thought about, let's bring one of those big Alberta whitetail bucks down here and take care of these little things?
Who would kill these little things, I think. Yes. I don't know if an Alberta whitetail would know what to do.
He wouldn't. He'd die. He'd die of starvation or thirst
walk around
out
looking
here.
at all these plants, wondering where the food is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, these Coues deer. The other thing, when I was 40 yards from that buck and he was cruising after that doe, I looked at him and I thought he was. I swear he's the size of like a small mule deer fawn with antlers.
That's right. Yeah, our big mature bucks are maybe 100. I think if you take a big sample size, like from my check stations, A buck that's 3.5 years and older, big mature cows, whitetail bucks, are going to dress out about 107 pounds. That'd be a long-term average, about 107 pounds dressed out.
Oh, really? That big? Oh,
And yearling bucks will dress 50 pounds. Does will dress 50 pounds.
Okay, then that explains
Yeah,
it.
he looked 60 pounds.
Looks
Like
a
he
roe deer.
looked
Looks like
tiny.
a roe deer. So.
Yeah.
That one we saw the first morning, really a nice 8-point, I guess, but really pronounced. He looked so much bigger body size than any deer I've seen.
Yeah,
since we've been here.
Wade,
I mean, there's smaller deer all around, but those mature bucks have the musculature. I mean, they look like muscular.
I don't know where that guy went. Like,
I don't
he's
either.
there and then he's gone.
But that's kind of the story of
it's odd that they
deer
rut. They're
hunting.
rutting. The peak of rut is the first week in January.
Oh, that's the peak of
That's
the
when
rut.
they're peaking. Yeah, so they may be trailing out at this point here.
Okay.
Yeah, but you think about whitetails every place else in the country in November and some variation, but really odd how late they are here. And that evolutionarily is more timed with when the fawns are dropping. So the fawns are dropping in August in southeastern Arizona, and that's perfectly timed because the summer rains come second week in July. Everything greens up for about 4 weeks, and those fawns hit the ground. Mothers got lots of nutrition. The fawns can wean pretty quickly. So it's all the timing kind of adjusts so that the fawns are born at the correct time so that there's high survival through evolution.
Yeah.
So there are definitely so I hunted whitetails in Alabama, and those things were skittish and
Everything is in Alabama, I think.
But, I mean, they were like on another level, and I've noticed that these deer are like that too. And so you're thinking, so spot and stock with a bow is a huge challenge, and as I'm looking around, I'm not seeing very many people pull it off. But what about ambush hunting, like sitting over water or sitting over a pinch point?
In most years, we've got a bimodal rainfall, so we've got monsoon rains that come July and August and into a little bit of September, and then we're supposed to have rains scattered from October to March, but really intensified in December and January. So in an average year, if you get average rainfall, there's plenty of moisture in the plants. They're really not tied to water.
So it's just
this year is a little bit different where that.
That's what Wade was saying.
Yeah, last year when I was here, the landscape just had a greener tone to it. This year it's got more of a yellowish brown tone.
I was Javelina hunting with the kids last week, and when you walk and look at the ground, everything's dry and crispy. Whereas this time of year, on an average year, you've just green forbs in places, and so it's definitely a big difference in what
it's
they're able to
loud.
select right now. Yeah,
it is so loud right now because everything crunches.
So I've been lucky that you guys in Arizona, maybe this is going to create a conspiracy. When I tell people how many Arizona tags I've drawn, I'm not going to tell how many, but every time I come here, whether it's on these over-the-counter deer tags like I've done the last 2 years, or when I come on the Kaibab mule deer hunt that I did in October. No, this year it ran a little late. We got to hunt a couple days in November this year. It's always remarkable to me how Arizona does this really good job of mixing quantity or opportunity by just changing season dates or weapon type or whatever, but yet retaining some really good quality. And is that a conscious decision? Obviously,
Yes.
it's been going on forever.
It's a trade-off, and we, even among the Mule Deer Working Group, we've been talking a lot about this recently, and we just are writing and finishing a fact sheet that talks about how agencies have to balance the majority of people that just want to go hunting with their family and friends and spend time out there and get some venison in the freezer, and some segment of the public, a smaller segment, that would rather not hunt for 3 years if they could get a really primo tag during the rut. And so those are all constituents, and we need to satisfy all those different desires and provide a diversity of opportunities. And we do that by having a majority of the state, trying to provide as much opportunity as possible for the masses, and then we can do it two ways. We have a few game management areas that are designated for a special management, which is an older, more mature age structure, a better buck to doe ratio, fewer hunters in the field, so you're not running into as many people, and just all around better quality hunt and a chance to get an older mature buck. And so we can do that in some areas, but like you mentioned on the Kaibab, there's some areas because of the terrain and what the deer population is doing through the year that we can have some earlier hunts when buck vulnerability is really low. It's just really hard to kill deer in the forested area up on the summer range. So you can have kind of an opportunity hunt and let a lot of people hunt because hunt success is really low. And then later in that same area, you might get a snowstorm come in and all those big bucks start bailing off the plateau down onto winter range. And people that have that hunt are sitting in ravines and they're choosing what 4x4 they want to take home at that time.
I didn't have that problem.
You didn't?
Jim.
You didn't.
I couldn't even figure out what 3x3 I wanted to take home. But no, it's just, I think it's cool because in the world, Brian, well, you probably get it too, especially chairing that working group. You get the trophy hunter, meat hunter argument all the time. And to me, it frustrates me. We're hunters, first of all. I don't like it. I don't like us jumping into our own little camps. But if that's the context people want to talk about it in, as trophy hunters versus meat hunters, it is cool that you're able to do that here in Arizona. And you were talking about escapement here, and how the cactus and the cat claw and the ocatilla, in and of itself.
Yeah, the terrain it's the amount of habitat that we have away from roads, and a lot of people, if you go to more than a half mile from a road, you'd be surprised how few people you see back there hunting. And so you think about that across the whole landscape. There's a lot of habitat that deer are hanging out in rugged, rocky, brushy habitat more than a half mile from roads. They don't see very many hunters in reality. Whereas you drive down the road and it's lined with campers and you see people all over the place. You get off the road there into these canyons, and which we do, our family always has. You get up on a point way off the road, and you see people driving around on the roads and down at the more accessible areas, and nobody's back in where we are, which is great. Let them all road hunt, because that keeps them away from us.
Yeah, well, Arizona's fortunate in that respect that you have that kind of topography and geography.
And so all of our tags, like Coues whitetail tags, are a lottery style draw, limited entry, so that we can specifically manage the harvest in each game management unit. But you could even be more liberal than we are and not overexploit that deer population because of the terrain, because of the escape cover.
I noticed I was asking if we could shoot a doe, and it seems like with the Coues hunts, there are no doe hunts.
Right. Yeah, and we used to have, 20, 25 years ago, archery, you could take a doe. And then deer populations started really declining. And we held on to those doe tags and we had these conversations every year because there wasn't that many does killed by archers in any individual game management unit, except for a few that had some real high doe harvests that made us nervous. But by and large, archers weren't killing very many does, and so we allowed that opportunity. And then it just got to a point where deer populations were really declined, and it just didn't make any sense to allow people to kill any females when we're way below where we would like our deer population to be. So even though it was a low number, we stopped that. And then we just don't feel like we've recovered enough where we can bring those back on fully.
Well, you should have like an earn a doe program. Like if I came down here and built a water tank, I could shoot a doe or something, because like I can see right now.
Like Wisconsin's earn a buck.
Earn a buck, yeah. I can see if I'm ever going to get the joy of eating Coues whitetail, I'm going to have to bring a rifle.
I could tell you, I could have killed multiple does this trip already,
but
I just can't kill. I can't find very many bucks, and then when I do, usually I get one stock a day, roughly. And when I say stock, I'm being very liberal. Means I saw one and I got off the road.
Yeah, that's right.
So
my advice probably would be quit screwing around with quads.
There you go. Well,
come on.
So this entire day, this whole day was Coatimundi.
Dude,
we were hunting deer, but when that coati showed up, you've never seen two camera guys and two hunters dancing and jumping and already backslapping. Revenge, the reckoning.
Hey, I've never seen a critter like that before. So,
they're really unique.
Meanwhile, I was still hunting for Coues bucks. I just didn't see any.
No, I get it. We were seeing nothing but
Yeah, so
Nothing
I
but
unloaded my quiver
go.
on a monkey. But I still want to kill a deer.
My whole career, we get people calling in and say they saw this troop of monkeys.
yeah.
And then, of course, we know what they're talking about right away.
Yeah. Well, they were up in trees today.
Yeah.
Like monkeys. They were up there like picking these leaves.
We run an elk hunt a couple of years ago and scared some and just came around a couple bushes. And there's some coatis, and one freaked out so much it jumped about 4 feet up onto the bark. And when it was up on the bark, it saw and just kind of bounced off the tree, saw what we were, and bounced off the tree, and they all ran away.
On an elk hunt.
On an elk hunt. Yeah, up by Flagstaff.
There's quaddies all the way up there.
Yeah, they're not as common for sure.
Yeah, Jonathan talked about they've been expanding their range for years, and they're being seen as
We were
that
stalking
far
elk
north.
up west of Flagstaff, southwest of Flagstaff, and during a stalk, I see 2 javelina up there, and so they'll get up to Flagstaff, and that's about their northern limit. And even those javelina around Flagstaff, they must winter underneath someone's cabin or something. When there's snow, I don't know what they do. They don't have any underfur.
We in 2012 we had deer tags in elk tags in Unit 8, and wanting to get away from the traffic, we hunted right on the lip of Sycamore Canyon
Yep.
for elk, and we saw
Where we
some.
saw these was on the east side of Sycamore, so you were probably on the west side.
Yeah, we were on the west side. You could look over to 6B on the east side.
That's where we were, 6B.
Okay.
Well, so
The quality of Coues bucks I saw in 6B sitting on that rock,
yeah,
there's no charge for that tip, folks. If you've got the points, that rough, rugged, terrible country of Sycamore Canyon in 6B had some really nice
I don't
bucks.
think people realize what Sycamore Canyon is. It's not just like a little canyon.
Right, yeah.
It's like the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, you walk up to the edge of Sycamore Canyon, you're like, I don't need an elk. That big.
Unit 6B,
6B, like in Bravo.
like that's going to take forever to draw.
No, it takes like 4 or 5 points.
Yeah, probably wouldn't. But there's not many. Well, you're talking about elk, but for the whitetail, they've got a low density whitetail, and the region has traditionally been very conservative. I mean, they're very lightly hunted, so you get mature bucks, but it's lower density. It's not.
Yeah,
you won't see 50 deer a day up there.
No, we didn't. We saw maybe a dozen deer a day sitting on those rocks, but boy, there were some. Like that buck we saw the opening day, I think most of the bucks we saw glass in there were
Really?
that size or bigger. But
Yeah, I've got the itch for a big Coues buck now, like just to
so
it's like a unicorn.
tell us about your working group that you chair, Jim.
So there's the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, which is all the game and fish agencies in the West. There's 23 that are grouped together in an organization that they call WAFWA. And the WAFWA sponsored, back when the mule deer population in the early 90s, mid-90s was really declining throughout the West, they sponsored and got together a working group as part of WAFWA and designated one mule deer expert from each of the 23 Western states and provinces. And so I was the Arizona representative for that for about 8 or 10 years, and then the chair retired, and they appointed me the chair of that. So the last 12 years or so, I've been the chair of that group. And so we get together twice a year as a working group. And from the start, when mule deer populations were at low points throughout the West, we talked about what's affecting mule deer populations throughout the range and what kind of things can be done to kind of help managers on the ground make things better for mule deer. And so through the course of almost 20 years now, we've produced a whole range of habitat guidelines. Our whole focus is to take research and management experience and put it in a format, publications, and things that biologists and managers and hunters can learn more about what mule deer need and help out mule deer. And so we have energy development guidelines. We have guidelines on how to monitor mule deer populations. We have habitat guidelines for each of the 7 ecoregions in mule deer range in the West. We've done a lot of mapping exercises. We now have fact sheets that we've produced. So people say, how come you're not feeding the deer in the winter because we've got so much deep snow? Or what about predators? How are they affecting populations? Or are elk and mule deer competing with one another? And so all those kind of things that come up at public meetings and come up on discussion forums, we're producing this one-page fact sheet that basically here's what the 23 Western mule deer experts say about that topic. And we've got 24 of them produced and on our website now. And those come in really handy at public meetings and expos. And
what is that website? Because I'm sure Brian gets as many of these kind of conversations as I do.
Mm-hmm. So if you go to muledeerworkinggroup.com, so all one word, muledeerworkinggroup.com. And what it does is that's an easy one to remember. It redirects to the WAFO website, which is much more complicated, but it takes you right to the Mule Deer Working Group. And you scroll down, and all of the things we produce are PDFs, and they're all free.
Wow. I'm going to have to I'm going to have to create a meme.
I have to sit down.
Answers here at that spot, because I think Brian is a way bigger mule deer hunter than I am. You get pretty wound up about mule deer, I think.
Just in the last couple of years, because I grew up in the Portland Northwest, Oregon City, and mostly we hunt elk on the east side, do a little bit of Roosevelt elk hunting on the west, but mostly Rocky Mountain. And we get a deer tag, which Arizona, I think, is similar. So I can get a deer tag, buy an over-the-counter deer tag, and I can use it to hunt blacktails, or I can use it to hunt mule deer, but I have to pick one or the other. Mm-hmm. The deer tag applies to both. So, so I can choose one deer. There are some extra tags you can draw for blacktail only, but then your tag is good, so I can hunt mule deer on the east side, or I can hunt blacktail on the west side, and I can choose. And then,
is this archery or rifle or
archery?
Oh, archery.
Primarily archery.
Okay.
But if I choose to, I never wanted to hunt a mule deer because then I couldn't shoot a blacktail. And blacktail, there's a second season where you can hunt them in November during the latter half of the rut. Well, I never wanted to, unless it was a giant mule deer, I wasn't going to give up a rutting blacktail tag in my backyard. In right there, I can hunt like for weeks, couple weeks, 2-3 weeks right there by my house every day after work and in the morning, and it just extends that season and the time in the woods. If I shot a mule deer while I was out elk hunting, it just didn't have the same appeal. Plus, there are bigger blacktail where I had access to than public land mule deer in general. So I didn't really get into mule deer until Colorado.
Okay.
I moved to Colorado a couple of years ago, and I've been to Alberta twice now. And yes, I am flat out addicted to mule deer. But I like all the deer species. I've hunted Sitka blacktail. This is my first Coues hunt. I've hunted mule deer now. I love hunting them all. They're all fascinating to me, and I like them all. I don't get the whole, like, my uncle lives in Flagstaff, and he does some guiding, has been doing guiding for a long time, and he just loves to get out, and he can't draw these tags every so often, so he gets to go out and help other people that draw the tag, and gets out in the field a lot more. But he's always making fun of my interest in Coues deer, even though I've never been before. Because he's
mouse deer. We call them mouse deer.
Yeah, they're mouse deer. Like, they have tiny little antlers. Why would you even waste your time on a Coues deer when you could be hunting a mule deer?
You don't need many antelope jackrabbits to equal them.
Yeah.
Not much.
But for me, I never understood that, because it's just a different deer. And you got to appreciate it for what it is. And it's not a mule deer.
No, a lot of people put it way up on the pedestal just because of what we were talking about, just how alert they are and the unique, beautiful country that they live in. It's a whole different thing.
They call him the gray ghost.
Yeah, Jack O'Connor. Wrote about the gray
That's
ghost.
a well-earned title from my experience.
Yeah, they call the Columbian blacktail, the Pacific ghost. And the two of them are, honestly, I mean, blacktail so much, and I wanted to ask you about this. Blacktail are nocturnal to an extreme. So these big bucks, they really don't even come out during the daytime until till the rut. I mean, they're only out few weeks out of the year, but the rest of them, they're bona fide nighttime animals, you know. But these Coues bucks, do Coues deer move around a lot at night, or
they do at night, and it varies with pressure, of course, like any place. If they're in a place where they just don't see that many people, then they're much more relaxed and not so nocturnal. But in studies where they've hung radio collars on animals and actually looked at their activity levels, they're active, up to midnight. They start a little bit before it gets dark in those twilight hours, and then they'll be active up until midnight, and then sometimes they're up an hour or so before it gets light. And that, if you look at different studies, depending on how much pressure they get and how much disturbance there can be some real differences. Where there's more pressure, they're just like almost nocturnal. When you look at when they're coming in to drink water, for example, even during the dry period, just looking at that as a measure of activity, you see that in heavily hunted areas, they're coming in, 90% of their waterings at night. And in places where they're not that disturbed, they're more relaxed about it coming in.
That's what I wondered around here. Are they primarily coming into water at night?
One of the studies on desert mule deer showed that like 85% of the watering was done at night. So you're sitting at water, that makes you kind of think about how effective it is. Effective. It's not like that's not effective, but still, you think about, wow, they're mostly going to be coming in the dark.
Yeah, and I know that about blacktails. They're not pressured though very much. They're living in city centers and stuff like that.
The blacktail,
and suburban areas, and so I think maybe there's just a lot of people, so they just people go indoors after dark, and so then they come out. I don't know if that's just something they've always done or it's something new.
I would guess it's related to the urban activity.
But even in the mountains, they move quite a bit at night as well. Like a lot of the game camera stuff that all my buddies run and we've done, I mean, a lot of nighttime movement. So, and they've, as you read about blacktail, you'll read similar things about how much they move at night. But the Coues buck, that's one thing Sam and I have been discussing. Sam Soholt, he's here with us. And I've discussed, we've talked about sitting on water, but I'm like, you only got so many days. And when you can spot one and go after it, it's empowering. Like, it's like, okay, it's all on me. I'm going after it. And there's a certain thrill.
Yeah, I've done that in Mississippi and growing up in Wisconsin. I've sat tree stands, and it's really exciting when there's a deer underneath your stand. It's really exciting when an ermine comes up in the tree next to you, and all these other forest things that you see because you're part of the forest and you're silent. That's a really neat part of it. But if nothing comes down that trail, you just spent all afternoon. Nothing came down the trail.
And I don't know enough about their activity to, in terms of watering or something like that, to sit there without having a little more knowledge about their movement patterns.
And you can look around what kind of signs there and see if they're really hitting it.
They are, but I just can't tell if it's that dark.
Back to your working group, Jim. Again, I don't want to put you on the hot seat here, but there's all of these talks about, the term I often use is the decline in mule deer numbers or the collapse of the mule deer or whatever. And mule deer numbers, from what I remember, and this sounds like, Grandpa always, I hate to say it. I remember
Grandpa Newberg.
Yeah.
Newhap.
If my son would get with the program, you could aptly name me Grandpa Newberg. But right now, he's just not with it. Anyone listening, there is a commission involved. If you can get my son to marry this wonderful girl that he's been dating for 6 years, Lillian. Well, no, that's out of the way. So, we talk about how it used to be, the good old days. In your working group, were the good old days sustainable? I mean, you think about whether you want to look at record book entries or how few days it took for someone to shoot a good mule deer buck. Was that a sustainable trajectory?
Just looking at relative deer populations back then, and for a lot of people, especially now, a lot of the older hunters, not you, older
I like how you qualified that.
And I am serious. People maybe a little bit of maybe a generation ahead of us, they remember the 1950s and 60s and when there was a lot more mule deer in the West. But there was a lot of mule deer at that time, and that was really created from the disturbance the decade before. There was a lot more forest fires because we had less fire suppression. There was a lot heavier grazing because we didn't limit grazing as much as we do now. And then there's a lot more logging back then. So all that disturbance is what deer thrive on. They just absolutely, they're early successional species, which means they love disturbed habitat that's just recovering and coming back. And so you had that situation in the 50s and 60s, and you had these deer populations at high levels, but they were at that time, unsustainably high levels. They were taking advantage of that flourish of disturbed habitat, which has now matured, and the carrying capacity of the habitat, how many deer it can hold, is not at the levels it was back then. So we can't go back to the number of deer we had because the habitat's not in the same conditions, not as disturbed. And so the good old days were good old days, but they're not our focus as Western deer managers to get back to those days because those levels are too high for the habitat we've got now. And a lot of agencies are working hard on wildlife restoration, and a lot of organizations like Mule Deer Foundation and for Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation are working real hard on conservation easements and doing landscape scale habitat work. So we're trying to make the most of the habitat we can and create some of that disturbance that helps deer populations in southeastern Arizona, especially the whitetail populations in these mountain islands that we have. We can go in and do a little habitat project here and a little habitat project there, and it's great. But what really happens is we have this catastrophic fire that gets out of control and nobody can stop it, and it burns most of one of these mountain ranges. And then about 5 years ago, the whitetail population just starts skyrocketing. It just ramps up and up and up and up. And we saw that in the Catalinas, which is the mountain range right by Tucson. We had two big fires that were a year apart in 03 and 04. And the following 2 decades, that whitetail population just went up and up and up, and the number of mountain lions that were harvested in that unit went up and up and up and up. It was just classic. Really? Prey exploded, predators followed them, and they still really haven't come back down. That the habitat's still in enough shape. We've had some other fires come in, but what does the best and the most good on a landscape scale for our deer populations are these fires that we don't like. They're out of control. We don't want anybody's structure. We don't want anybody injured. But really, when we get a whole mountain range go up in flames, that's what makes our deer populations go up.
Wow. That's a lot of people don't want to hear that.
Right. I know it. I mean, those are not good things necessarily, but that happened historically before we spent millions and millions of dollars on fire suppression.
Right.
That happened, and that's the deer populations that we had historically. Now we put out all the fires. We don't let any fires burn at all, and then we wonder why we don't have high deer populations.
Well, if you live where I live in Bozeman, Montana, in wolf country, and so I may as well just say it now so everyone can email me, contact@randynewberg.com, tell me what an idiot I am. But in our part of the world, everyone says it's the wolves. In
our part of the world, it's coyotes and mountain lions, but people are too quick to label predators as the issue. And it's so easy. It's understandable because predators are something visible, tangible. They're out there in the woods. They're killing these animals that we care about. And so they're the most obvious thing that's controlling the deer population or taking animals out of the population. But it's much more complex than that. We've got, like I've talked about, the fire suppression. It's a huge issue in why we have less deer now than before. In other areas, we have brush encroachment like juniper, where we had more open areas where sunlight hits the forest floor and grows a lot of shrubs and a lot of forbs, which are just the weeds that deer like to eat. And now we've got juniper crowding that in, and you don't have the amount of deer food that's on the ground. You've got grazing levels are actually, by and large, a lot better than they used to be historically. We've gotten national forests and BLM lands. We've gotten a lot better in grazing management in the last few decades that I've seen. But it's that disturbance, like forest practices. We used to go in and log a lot more aggressively. And anytime you open that closed canopy, let sunlight onto the forest floor, you get shrubs and forbs, and that's what makes deer populations is shrubs and forbs. And now we've got closed canopies. We're protecting it from fire. We're protecting it from mean old loggers.
Right.
And we don't have the carrying capacity for deer that we used to have.
Well, people always accuse me of being a fan of logging because I came from a logging family. My brother is still a logger, and he makes jokes with me because I can't fix anything. And to be a logger, you got to be a mechanic. You got to be a multitude of things. Mm-hmm. But I don't have a bias pro or plus logging. I have a bias towards qualified productive habitat. That's what I'm about. And the fire suppression. And my listeners are probably saying, "Here we go again. Newberg's going to talk about burns." People see all of our video and our images, and they're like, "Do you ever not hunt a burn?"
Well,
and the answer is
not if you have a
very
choice.
right. That's it, Jim. If there is a burn, that's where I'm going, and because it's the only landscape disturbance that I know of that is consistent and going to be on a large scale that I can count on.
Really produces nutrition. When that Catalina mountains population I was just talking about, where the whitetails really went up. You would see people with pictures of these big old bucks, and either they were in a burn or the antlers were all black and sooty.
Yeah.
And you knew they were hunting in the burn there.
Yeah.
Well, I noticed that back in Oregon, when they started developing neighborhoods and taking down some old, forested areas and putting in people's lawns and their 5-acre lots, and the deer populations exploded.
Yeah, probably
Really?
did.
Oh, just because of the trees getting
The
moved
trees
out.
cleared out. Now you have all this different type of. They're eating people's grasses and ornamentals.
All kind of
and-
ornamental shrubs that are palatable, and they'll eat grasses.
And
when
the sun is breaking through this huge canopy that typically doesn't have much to eat.
Yeah.
And now it's got this, the sun comes through on people's yards, and there's just all this feed. And then there's the area that butts up from the yard to the forest that's usually thick, and they like to bed and get right in that in-between habitat.
They have food, water, and cover right there in close proximity. And they may also have a relief from predation because there's less mountain lions and coyotes hanging around by the houses. So sometimes there can be a buffer of predators avoiding the humans.
Yeah.
And a little refuge for them.
Yeah.
So you're saying that if I go to Oregon and
Sit on the
like
You want to hunt people's backyards.
backyard?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Find somebody who's got a.
I did a
10
podcast
acres.
on that with some boys from Atlanta, Georgia, which will air here pretty soon. But they're hunting in downtown Atlanta. I'm not joking. They're shooting next to people's swimming pools,
Really?
and it's a big thing.
Huh.
And there's deer, just piles of them in the city that you
Really?
would think that aren't there, moving around at night. It's fascinating. What deer are fascinating. How they adapt.
Very adaptable.
So with well, you go ahead, Randy.
No, Jim brought you a book. Brought one for each of
yeah.
us. The Jack
Did
book.
bring in another age guide too. Which
Oh yeah, here we can
second one.
age animals of the Southwest. Not that we've shot. There's not a
okay.
Coatimundi in here. That's what I was looking
Mern's
for.
quail are in there though.
I was trying to see how to age your Coatimundi.
All right, Heffelfinger. I see in here
Yeah, look.
what I guess are jackrabbits, but they look about the size of a Coues deer.
Yeah,
They're our smallest big game species in Arizona. The antelope jackrabbit.
your smallest big game species or your biggest small game species?
Either way, I like to say they're their smallest big game species because they're really more akin to big game.
Dude, look at that.
I
Those things
know.
are gigantic.
Yeah,
the antelope jackrabbit is a huge jack, and we ate some.
we ate some tonight. That was tremendous.
He said, Hank was saying that they're literally like a small deer. Like
They are.
in terms of how they eat,
Yeah,
how
and
their
the
anatomy, and just
Jack books that you're looking at that have some instruction, a little bit on jackrabbit ecology and identification, and it's mostly recipes. And we designed that book in conjunction with Junior Jack Camp that I invented about 9 years ago because I was sitting around the kitchen table and we had been hunting jackrabbits. And in fact, to back up one step, I was talking to an old friend of my wife's sister's back in Wisconsin, and he had lived in Tucson for a long time. And his wife was from Cyprus, and she loved jackrabbits because that's about the biggest thing they have to hunt on in Cyprus.
Okay.
And so she always grew up eating rabbits. And so he was showing me pictures of these big jackrabbits he was shooting, and I thought, I've got 4 young boys, that would be fantastic, but I really don't want to just go shoot jackrabbits if we're not going to eat them. And he said, no, they're fantastic. My wife sends me out into the desert to get her some jackrabbits, and so he took us jackrabbit hunting, and I was hooked. This is amazing. And so I would go with my kids, and one day at the supper table I said, this is just too good not to share with a bunch of kids. And so we developed this junior jackrabbit camp where they come on Friday afternoon, and I give a little talk on jackrabbit and grassland ecology. And then we do a hunter safety kind of refresher on gun handling. And then the next morning, Saturday morning, we have local sportsmen that come to act as mentors and guides and take the kids out. And we focus on, it's kids 10 to 14 years old that have had successful hunter education. They've got to graduate from hunter education. Take them out jackrabbit hunting Saturday morning. And jackrabbit hunting is just taking a scope 22 rifle and not a shotgun, and you're walking slowly and quietly through the desert. And so you're teaching the kids how to walk slowly through the desert, not make any noise, not talk. Use your binoculars to scan and look under the bushes. And then when you see a rabbit, you've got to get set up. The kids got to get in good shooting position, good stable, have good marksmanship skills, shoot the rabbit. We take the rabbits back on Saturday midday, and then we have two big easy up tent set up, awning set up with cords and carabiners hanging down, and we take all the biological data and measurements from the rabbits. So we publish some scientific papers from the rabbit data that we've gotten. We hang the rabbits up, and I've got a YouTube video. If you search jackrabbit cleaning on YouTube, you'll see a pretty popular YouTube video that we did professionally with the agency. We skin the rabbits. You don't take the guts out. I tell the kid the guts are icky. You don't want to go in there. So you just skin the animals. We quarter them. And we take the back straps off the back. The back straps are huge on them. And so the kids learn how to process an elk.
The gutless method for jackrabbit.
And so we put all that meat in the cooler. We label it so the kids take the meat home. And then that afternoon, I cook about 8 gallons of jackrabbit stew. And then everybody else brings, it's kind of a potluck. They bring food. And so Saturday night, we feast on jackrabbit stew. And then Sunday morning, we go out for another hunt. And we get back, and then we give out awards for the largest jackrabbit, the greatest outside spread, because we measure the ears. We measure the ears, so we do greatest outside spread. And give the kids a couple plaques. And the kids go back, and the neat thing about that weekend is they leave, if we're trying to target families that have no experience in hunting at all. And when they leave, the parents know how to find a good place to jackrabbit hunt. They know how to actually hunt. They know how to clean them, and they've got a cookbook, and they know how to cook them, and they've eaten it, and they know that it's pretty good. So it's a neat little starter package to get a family something they can do and something they can go out and hunt. And it's been hugely successful at the local Sportsman's Warehouse. All of a sudden you start seeing jackrabbit pictures showing up on the bragging board out there. And it was pretty funny. After we started doing this, you started seeing jackrabbit pictures posted all the time. So it's kind of neat.
If one of Brian's listeners, one of my listeners is from Arizona and they want to help or to get their young hunter involved in this, how do they call the agency? Or?
Get the Arizona hunting regulations, and in the youth section has all the youth camps, and the junior jack camp is listed in there, and it has a contact. It's the Arizona chapter of Safari Club International that is the sponsoring sportsman group. They cook all the meals, so all the meals are cooked for the kids, and they pay for the meals, they pay for the porta potties that are out there, and they set up the camp, provide some of the mentors, and so you can get the contact right in the Arizona regulations.
So
and that's going to be the second weekend in March this year.
Okay,
so it's coming up.
Oh, so they could get in.
Absolutely, we'd love to have the help.
Are you Jackrabbit Jim? Where it says Jackrabbit Jim's Jack Stew?
I did get that name right away when we started the Jackrabbit camp. Jackrabbit Jim.
Huh? Jackrabbit Jim Heffelfinger, a guy from Wisconsin.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Is Jackrabbit Jim? Huh? Well, I could not believe how wonderful that jackrabbit was that we ate tonight. Yeah. And is there a difference between the taste of the antelope jackrabbits and what are they? The
blacktails are the other ones. There may be, they're very similar, but I've had some experiences where some blacktails seem not as good as the antelope jackrabbit. Okay. Antelope jackrabbit's just so big, and you clean that and you look at that meat, and it's just beautiful meat. And yet there's kind of a stigma attached to jackrabbits. When you tell people you eat jackrabbits, they say, "Wow, I ate one in college once." My grandmother used to cook jackrabbits. It's kind of a weird thing, but it really isn't. If you just get through that and you kill a jackrabbit, you clean it, you take that meat home, and it's a dark meat. If you use a beef kind of recipe, don't think chicken, don't think pork, but cook like a beef stew. We make jack carnitas. There's a lot of recipes in there, and it's mostly kind of a beef-based recipe.
Yeah,
it's really good meat. There's nothing.
It was so good.
Yeah,
we had it tonight.
It was unbelievable. If you would have put me at that table and said, "Randy, make yourself one of these that Hank put out there and eat it.
You'd never guess.
You could have given me 1,000 guesses and I would not have guessed jackrabbit.
Absolutely.
No way. But what a cool way to get young people involved.
It is, and it's perfect because the hunting style is exactly what they need. We teach them how to walk in the desert, heel to toe, roll on your feet, so they're not scuffling and shuffling in the dirt. And those little, and then skills of watching underneath in the shadowy spots, taking binoculars and checking things that look like rabbits, and then getting down, getting in a good position, or using shooting sticks. Those are all skills that transfer to everything else they'll do.
Maybe we should go to the jackrabbit camp, right?
I know, it looks
Do you
cool.
have a Coues deer camp?
I got
You
3
could get
little
more
kids.
meat probably going to the jackrabbit.
No lie.
We need
It's
to
no
sign
lie.
up for the Coues deer camp. Do you have a Coues deer camp?
Yeah, but 10 to 14-year-olds.
Oh. In age or in behavior?
Yeah.
The jackrabbits make great pictures for kids when you get a kid to hold it out like a bass fisherman holds out a bass.
Some of these
close to
are
the
as
camera.
tall as the kid.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of that's camera
Ears
angle
to
and some
tail.
of it's a 10-pound rabbit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With like an extra 12 inches of ear.
Yeah, right.
No, that one that Holly, she shot, when she brought that in yesterday, look at the picture of that one in the book. I could not believe how big that jackrabbit
When the
was.
kids come in, we take biological data from all of them, and the kids come in, the first thing they do is they write their name with a Sharpie on the ear. Those are just pre-made labels. They just write their name so that we keep track of them when we process them.
Wow.
So speaking of data, Arizona Game and Fish, do you guys have mandatory reporting? Is it mandatory or is it?
It's not mandatory,
But it's-
it's voluntary, and
Okay.
we did it for years with checkout cards. We'd mail cards at the end of the hunt, and we still mail cards. But it was you take your pen, and it would only take a couple seconds to fill that thing out, and it was pre-postage and mail it back in, and still we had 55% return rate. Now I think we're down to low 40% return rate. And so in the last couple of years, we've transitioned, like a lot of agencies have, to online reporting, where you get that card in the mail and it's got your hunt number and tag number on there, which you need. And you can log onto the website and report how many days you hunted, what unit you hunted, whether you killed anything, whether it was a spike or a forkhorn. And I got after our agency last year because I noticed my card said, was your deer that you harvested a spike or a buck? And I said, wait a minute, a spike is a buck.
Yeah.
why are we denigrating the spike by not calling it a buck? But you just tell what you harvested online, and the cards that come now have a little QR code for nerds like me that just shoot it with your QR reader on your phone. It goes right to the site. You make a couple selections and press go, and you're done. It still takes about 15 seconds. And so, we always try to encourage people to return that. There's some people that are paranoid that, well, if I return that and say that I killed something, they're going to lower the number of tags next year. And that's not what happens. What happens is hunters provide harvest information, and that's really a vital data stream coming in. We survey the deer population, so we have real information on the actual populations, and then we get post-hunt harvest information. We put those two together to make hunt recommendations for the next year. But everybody needs to play a part in helping the biologists conserve deer and manage deer. Really, the hunters, by providing all of that post-hunt harvest information, are partners in management of the deer populations. And so we just got to encourage everybody to respond. It's important.
Dude, Montana doesn't have mandatory. Does Colorado and Oregon? I'm trying to remember Colorado. I had an elk tag there 2 years ago. I can't remember.
There is reporting. They do a survey. They call out.
Oh, that's what Montana does too.
We have discussions every year about the value of and the problems with mandatory reporting. So people
Alaska
say
does.
if you do mandatory reporting, then you get all of the data. I mean, you won't get all of it, but you get a lot more. But the problem is, if it's mandatory, it means if they don't do it, there has to be a punishment.
Right.
So now you're a state agency and you're punishing people that never got their card in the mail or forgot to do it or got busy or lost it. Now you're punishing people, and you're possibly creating a barrier to participation the next year. So that's one thing you have to weigh is, are you getting good enough data without mandatory reporting? And if you're not, then you might have to do that. But if you think you're getting good enough harvest information without going to some kind of mandatory punishment situation, then maybe that's a better deal.
Does it save you guys a lot of money to do it online?
Yes. Yes. All of that postage that comes back costs money, and it's not just getting that data back to us, but when you do it online, it's already entered. The cards come back, and we have people sit in a room and manually enter that data, which not only takes more conservation dollars just for data entry, but it also creates another step where you can introduce errors into the system, where if the hunters just do it on their phone or do it on their computer, it's already in the database, and it costs nothing to get it back.
You hunted in Montana this year, right?
No.
No?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Thought you hunted elk.
I did. Mm-hmm.
Did you get a phone call? So Montana, this is the same.
I did get a phone call from Colorado last week, but
this is the same system Montana's been using forever, and I can't imagine how much it costs to have rooms full of people calling hunters off mailing lists or phone lists, and a lot of times they're not there. Or if you're like me, you screen your calls. I don't
Game department. I'm not picking that up.
Well, or it's like I don't recognize this number.
Right.
I'm not taking it.
right.
And how much money they could save if they went to an online, whether mandatory or voluntary, I don't know. But so if I guess I always preach that if hunters want to say that hunting is conservation, then hunters better be conservationists,
Right.
and that data is critical for you guys who are managers. And
It is. My first 23 years as a regional biologist, I coordinated the hunt recommendation for 16 game management units. So wildlife managers submitting hunt recommendations. And what we're all looking at together is where is your buck to doe ratio, your fawn to doe ratio on the survey side, and then the harvest side. Where's your hunt success, the percent of hunters that were successful? Is that within our management guidelines? So we have management guidelines that help us determine whether to increase or decrease permits or stay the same. And so we have these little windows that we try to stay between. So if your buck to doe ratio is above guidelines, things are doing pretty well. If your fawn to doe ratio is above guidelines, you're going to have more yearling bucks next year for the hunting season that you're prescribing a hunt for. If your hunt success is above guidelines, then hunters are being more successful than what the public working with you agreed would be a reasonable range. So that's a strong indication to increase permits. And if they're all below guidelines, you decrease permits. Most of the time there's some above, some below. And so we, as biologists, talk about the relative importance of those things and make a recommendation. But you're right, it's all, hunters are our partners in managing those deer populations, and it's not just kind of neat to know information. It's vital information to make decisions on permit levels.
You're looking at that Jackrabbit book, Brian.
I know. Looking at this.
I think you might go for like the Sonoran hat trick here.
Dude.
Tomorrow, if you shot an antelope jackrabbit with your bow and then a Coues deer,
Yep.
I think they would hail you as the greatest archer to hunt Arizona this year.
Well, I am a man on a mission.
Even Dwayne Adams never got a quaddy. I don't know that. Maybe he did.
That's what I told Brian this morning. I said, I bet you I could count on both hands. I don't think I'd need all 10 fingers to count the number of quaddies that are shot with archery gear each year.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to get a deer tomorrow. It's my last hoorah.
Yeah, tomorrow's our last day.
And if I don't, I'll be back. I'll be back either way.
Yeah, you guys have this figured out for us people who live in cold climates.
Yeah, no kidding.
To come down here for the whole month of January.
A little sunshine.
There's so much you can do.
Yeah, I mean, so Marcus, my camera guy, him and his wife Kara came down a week early. They both archery hunted for javelina, and they both filled their tags. Last year, I shot a duck when I was here. Shot Mearns quail. I should have been shooting jackrabbits. I saw a ton of them, but I thought if I'm in charge of cooking them, they'll taste like my normal cooking, so I passed on them all. I had 2 great stocks on Coues deer, and the weather was 65 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you guys need to bottle this and sell it, man. I mean,
yeah.
After Brian and I are done, this place, you're going to have to bring your own rock to stand on down here. Should we keep it a secret?
I'm a little envious of Sam's napping ability in the afternoon because I've wanted to take a nap, but I'm too obsessed with getting a deer that I can't rest.
And
So
that's
I
good
have
unless
to
you're falling asleep. For the
I have
last
to glass through while he sleeps an hour or two, and then it catches up to you day after day. But that might be the moment where that buck steps out. I'm like,
Were you
I'm
the
focused.
Energizer Bunny in the prior life? Has anyone ever accused you of that?
It's funny because I get as soon as the day's done, I'm all about sleep. You know, but
I've watched
on the
you out there. You're like just a glimmering dot bouncing around from place. Where's Brian? Oh, there he is. Where's Brian? Oh,
I move. I mean, there's no distance I think is too far or a hill too steep or too high or like I'm out. I'm very, especially on a spot and stock like this or chasing elk. And I could probably benefit from a little more patience and sitting still. But as soon as we spot a deer, I'm like, okay, anybody? Okay, I'm out. And I'm.
I wrote an article about called "Great Glassing Guidelines," talking about showing people that aren't familiar with the spot and stalk thing. And one of the subcategories was fools rush in.
Yeah.
You have to be careful not to be too aggressive, but also you have to be careful not to go too slow and they just feed off and you never find them.
Yep.
So you got to find that. You got to find that.
I feel like we're getting that balance. That first day though, with that big buck on the hill, Sam spotted it. I spotted a different one earlier, 2 of them, but they disappeared, which is normal with these mouse deer. And then up on the hill, though, Sam had a nice one bedded down with like 4 or 5 does around it. Nice buck. It's like, I'm excited, So we head over there. We're about 15 minutes, 20 minutes up the mountain. And those deer gathered up and left. And that buck was just rutting a doe hard, like ran all the way around this mountain and all the way up and over the top of the next one. Sam and I didn't know this. Wade saw it on the spotter. We have no way of communicating with him, and so we proceed to sneak in. It was the most glorious stalk you've ever seen, Jim, to a cliff where they were bedded underneath. And we got to the cliff, and we're like, they've been gone for more than an hour.
Yeah.
So frustrating.
Yep.
Yeah, when we pulled up there, Wade said, those guys are throwing rocks down in there. They think those deer are still there.
Well, there were a couple deer still in there, and they had run out. And after a while, I'm like, I think they're gone. I think the buck is gone. But there was 2 does still in this thicket, and trying to get them to get up and move, and maybe more deer would pop out. But evidently, the buck had already left with a few other does, I guess. Well, at least that one doe, and that's that's the double-edged sword with a rutting deer,
Right. Easier to see, but you don't know.
Easier to see, but they don't stay put for very long, especially when there's some action to be had. So I don't know about another time of year, or later in the season, but it is nice when I'm hunting mule deer in Alberta and I put one to bed and it's pretty much not going to move until almost dark.
The earlier archery seasons for Coues whitetail too is it's, even though it's hot and it's not that great to hunt, you get in there and do some scouting and find a nice buck, and he may be bedded under that same tree every day.
Really?
And it's a very consistent.
That's how Alberta mule deer are too.
They kill those big bucks that way by patterning them because they don't move much. And then, once there's some of the deer seasons and more people mixing things up, then they're not so habitual to the same tree. And then, of course, once rut comes, they're all over the place. But in those early hunts, you can go find where a big buck he's been hanging out all summer in this little side canyon, and he really no reason for him to leave yet.
What time? What year? What time of year is that?
It's like the August, September. Those early hunts.
Is that archery?
And then you have
archery.
You guys have leftover tags in a lot of units for your first.
Dude, how hot is it?
Hunt. Yes, right, for the rifle hunts. And I did an analysis one time when I was a regional biologist and showed that of those units south of I-10, between I-10 and the border, and the Mexican border, there was less a lower application rate, a declining application rate for those border units as we had more and more border issues down there. And north of I-10, where there really isn't that much border issues, you had kind of an increasing participation rate, like people were shifting away from the border at that time.
Yeah.
And you have more leftover tags in those border units.
How Brian's question, and I was thinking the same thing. How hot is it in that early archery season?
It's hot.
Like 100 degrees probably in August.
Yes.
September.
Mm-hmm. Definitely 100 degrees.
I don't do well on that. Do you?
I do.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, even
Brian will be here.
Even if you can withstand it, it's tough when you get a deer on the ground, taking care of that meat, getting that out of there quick.
Ooh,
they're so little. You just sling it over your shoulder.
Yeah, you do want to skin it though. Get that skin off it and get it. And even when we're javelina hunting, we're not that far from the truck. You've got to clean it at some point. We get it in a juniper, skin the thing, get the meat in cheesecloth bags. You've got less to carry. The meat cools off. We always treat our meat that way.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't take long to break down one of those.
I don't think so.
It'll make you after you kill one. I think after I kill one, because I will someday.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I will question why when I see how little meat there is.
Why was I so obsessed?
And then I'm going to treat that meat like gold.
Anyone ever like spit roast them like they do a big pig or something?
I'm sure, but I have never seen it. I've never been around someone that did it. You could.
It'd look pretty, like Hank would say. I mean, it'd be a pretty,
you could
display.
stuff it inside a hog. You could have
stuff an apple in its
deer
mouth
hog.
and make the whole.
Leave the antlers attached.
What
and
did
get
Jonathan
all
say?
charred.
He said something like, with what's great about those Coues ears, you shoot one, you can just put it in your pocket and walk back to camp.
Your game bag.
Yeah.
What other challenges do you guys have managing deer in Arizona, other than human population growth?
In desert areas like this, there's not a lot of habitat manipulation you can physically go in and do. And in more northern areas, you can go in and you can burn brush to stimulate that brush recovery. You can actually do some logging to open up sunlight in the forest floor. So there's some things that you can, in a more wetter environment like that, there's more things you can do to disturb the habitat. You don't come down in here in this rolling desert grassland that really hasn't been disturbed much, and they evolved without a lot of disturbance down here, and physically do things to the habitat to increase carrying capacity. It's really about making sure that they have water distribution during those dry times of the year and those really dry years, and making sure that the grazing is not too intensive so that you've got the forbs, you've got fawning cover and things like that. So it's kind of a grazing, water, and then making sure grazing isn't impacting the browse, the shrub community. It's harder to actually actively do habitat management in a desert area. These, you're not going to go start a fire in the saguaro cactus forests. Those saguaros were 700 years old, and they're not going to bounce back in a decade. And they didn't evolve with fire in that environment. So
right. So are we going to get you in trouble if we talk wolves?
No, not at all.
Because Brian is the only archer I know who's taken a wolf with his bow.
I saw some other dude do that in like Michigan.
Yeah,
I think with a Minnesota,
right? Yeah,
from a tree stand,
Yeah.
way up north. He was hunting for deer, and so I've seen one other guy. But yeah, I mean, I shot a wolf in Idaho, and we heard him howling. The second we got to camp, North Idaho. It's thick, and certainly changed the behavior of the elk a lot. A lot of the locals are not too happy about that because the good old days aren't. The elk aren't as vocal as they had been, back when these people were kids and grew up hunting in that area and everything.
Yeah.
But the wolves were howling, and there were different packs all over. I mean, it seemed like there were a lot of wolves. I mean, they were thriving in this environment. There also seemed like there was a lot of elk too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and we got into elk a lot. But wolves.
Yeah, the recovery, the wolf recovery has been so contentious in the lower 48 because we lost them. We didn't have wolves. They're not as contentious in Alaska, although they have been at times, or Canada. They've always had wolves, so it's not a big deal. But we lost them, and then to bring a big controversial carnivore like that back then creates a lot of issues. And so it's so polarizing. The whole, I've said for a long time I love wolves, but I don't like the wolf world, quote unquote wolf world.
Yeah.
So contentious, so polarized. You got half the people saying that we need to bring wolves back because they're going to rejuvenate the environment, and then we're going to return the birds and the butterflies and the beavers, just like Yellowstone. Right. And if you talk to someone like David Meach, who's worked on wolves for 60 years, he'll tell you that even in Yellowstone, it's really unclear how much of an impact. They had some impact on the recovery of the Yellowstone ecosystem, but we had those big fires in '88. We have changes in hydrology. We had, for example, that elk population that would winter up by Gardner, Montana. There were about 17,000 elk when the wolf recovery started. That elk population plummeted to about 4,000, and they stopped that hunt. They had a cow hunt off of the park. And that decline in that elk population, some people want to blame all on wolves. Now, wolves had an impact in that, but during that period of time, there was some real dry summer years that reduced elk recruitment during that time. And that cow hunt off of the park, they did surveys every year and maintained those cow tags a little bit longer than they probably should have, because they really didn't believe that the population was dropping that much. Maybe they had a bad survey. Maybe they were wintering farther out where they didn't survey. So they kept those cow tags on a little bit too long. So human harvest had some impact in that. Wolves had some impact in that. And so we had all of these different things working together to reduce that elk population. And some people want to say, look, they restored wolves to Yellowstone and all this beautiful stuff happened. And it's way more complicated than that. And so in the wolf world, you have one side of the spectrum where people say wolves are evil. If we bring wolves back, they're going to decimate big game populations everywhere. And the other side says that they're necessary for the environment and everything can be wonderful if we bring wolves back. And as David Meach said in a manuscript, that wolves are neither saints nor sinners except when people try to make them so.
Yeah.
And so they're somewhere in the middle. I mean, wolves are just native carnivores. We've got coyotes. We've got a couple different kinds of foxes. We had wolves. And so state agencies manage native carnivores all the time. It's not really a big deal. And so what we need to do is get wolves in areas where they're no longer in danger of extinction, turn management over to the states. And the states aren't evil. The state agencies are very successful in managing hundreds of native species, and they'll manage wolves appropriately so that we have wolves on the landscape where they should be, because they're native North American animals, but not so many wolves so they can be managed. So there's not so many wolves where they're creating unacceptable impacts to native ungulate populations and livestock operators and people that live on this working landscape.
Yeah, you guys are dealing with that here in Arizona right now.
We are. We've got our version with the Mexican wolf. So the Mexican wolf recovery plan was just signed in November. And the recovery plan, compared to some of the other, there was a Mexican wolf recovery plan that was written in 1982. And back then, there was no Mexican wolves in the wild. And back then, they couldn't even envision Mexican wolves being recovered at all. And so the recovery plan just said, we don't think they're even recoverable. Let's bring some into captivity, breed them so they don't blink out completely. And if we could ever get, say, 100 wolves out in the wild, that would be good. Now, they didn't say that was recovery and they would be no longer in danger of extinction. They just said it'd be nice if we could maybe get a population of 100 somewhere. And, well, wolves being wolves, you just release them. As long as they've got something to eat and they can find each other to breed, they do just fine. They don't need us to manage them. And so they started restoring and releasing wolves in 1998 with a couple of wolves in Arizona and New Mexico. We had several years where that population increased, and then they were starting to cause impacts on some individual livestock operators. There was a political groundswelling of we can't have these wolves shouldn't be reintroduced, all this negative talk about the wolf recovery program, that it became apparent that things were headed in a bad direction, like the whole recovery program was in jeopardy because of this groundswell of kind of wolf hatred that was growing. And so they kind of switched management gears and started getting more aggressive on taking care of problem wolves. So wolf got into trouble, we'll take care of it in a more aggressive manner. They did that for a number of years from 03 to 2009 and found that that was really too aggressive. The population flatlined, stopped growing. And so by 2009, there was a court injunction forcing the agencies to stop being so aggressive. And since 2009 to the present, that wolf population has increased an average of 16% per year, which is pretty similar to Yellowstone in the first 10 years of recovery.
Yep.
So that Mexican wolf population right now is on a fantastic trajectory. We've got a new recovery plan that calls for 320 wolves in Arizona, New Mexico population and 200 wolves in Mexico. We've got Mexican people with radio-collared wolves, people in the field monitoring them. 3 more releases in Mexico planned for this year, and we've got a plan for the U.S. It's a practical plan that can actually work on a landscape full of people. And so it's a good plan. Environmental groups and some individuals are attacking it right now. 2 lawsuits were just released today.
Imagine that.
Against the plan.
Let me guess. One of them was based out of here in Tucson.
It is.
Center for Biological Diversity, who just...
So we'll be working through that. But I welcome that fight because the lawsuits speak to this plan is not based in science. It's all political. And those people saying that weren't involved in the process at all. I was. They don't even they don't even know. They're going off of talking points. And those of us that were involved in the process know that it's all the latest science. This new plan, some of the earlier versions of the plan used Yellowstone mortality rates for the model, Yellowstone wolf mortality rates. Well, now we have Mexican wolf mortality rates from real Mexican wolves since 1998, and we use that real data to put in the model. And there's all kinds of other parameters that they were grasping out of the scientific literature, and now we have real Mexican wolf data from our wolves on the ground that actually form the scientific foundation of this plan. So it's a plan that's solidly based in science and practical and achievable on the ground. So it's really, I think, a good thing for everybody. We'll recover wolves. We'll have Mexican wolves in the Southwest again, but not in such a way, hopefully, from that we saw in the Northern Rockies, where wolf populations were 5 times the recovery criteria before they were finally able to be delisted, and they were only delisted by an act of Congress.
Right.
The agency still couldn't do it. And so we'll get that when we reach these recovery criteria, which the wolves will no longer be in danger of extinction. We'll get lawsuits from environmental groups that say that they're still in danger of extinction, and we're just going to have to deal with those. But hopefully we've learned something from the Northern Rockies, and we've got such a good scientific foundation behind this one that I welcome that battle. I would love to have any kind of debate with any of them about the science behind this plan, because it's solid.
Well, I'm sure you will get that battle, Jim. As someone who lived in Ground Zero, and a lot of those outfits based in Bozeman, they get upset when I say this, but to them, a wolf is not a canine. It's a bovine. It's a cash cow.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's all that drives their quote-unquote
deity.
advocacy for wolves. And I'm with you. I mean, when we did the TV show where we shot a wolf, and maybe you felt the same way, Brian, when you shot your wolf. When we walked up to that wolf, I just had this huge amount of respect for any animal that lives out here. It took us 11 days to find that wolf and kill it. You shot yours the first day. You're like that. You're the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, mine was blind luck, but
you see him, and it's like, a wolf is just being a wolf.
Yep.
He's trying to eat. He's trying to make a living, and all of a sudden you throw all the politics and social, ideas of everything about it in the mix, and then it creates the haters and the lovers, and they can't look at it objectively as, it's a wolf being a wolf. Let you guys at state level do your work, have it managed just like everything else, and they'll always have a place on the landscape.
Wolves they're neat. And I'm a deer person. I'm a big game person, but wolves are they're cool. It's just that they can't be released and then completely unfettered growth with lawsuits prohibiting management. We need to be able to restore them so they're not in danger of extinction anymore, but they're managed to a reasonable level so they're not incurring some of these unacceptable impacts on our other game species. And that, from a manager's perspective, that's easy to do. It's the politics and the rest of it that makes it difficult. But to actually manage wolves in balance with the prey populations is not mechanically hard to do.
Yeah, for me, it was a sad commentary that Congress had to actually
we don't ever want
intervene before Idaho and Montana could get management of wolves. That
we don't ever
that's
want that.
That's the symptoms to me. It was of a broken system that the science itself could not. But the science supported everything, but no one would listen to it if it wasn't their quote unquote science.
Yeah, I think the Midwest has between 5,000 and 6,000 wolves now.
Yeah, that's
and there's
crazy.
Still academics that are writing scientific papers saying that they're not out of danger. They're still in danger of extinction, which is it's ludicrous. But these are well-known academics writing in the peer-reviewed scientific literature, and and they believe that they're right. But I think any person with common sense says, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. There's 5,000 of them.
One of the funner things I read about wolves in the last year was National Geographic magazine did a whole thing about Yellowstone Park. Was their May.
We were in Yellowstone about the time that was released. And
and so they called me and asked me for a couple quotes and comments. But the interest I had in it was that Arthur Middleton, who is a researcher, you should get him on your podcast, Brian. He studies these migration corridors and how
and Joe
critical
Reese is
they
the
are.
photographer. They teamed up with National Geographic.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Well, they had a long multi-page article of Middleton in his work. And I was surprised they printed this response, but they asked him, well, what do you think about wolves? He said, well, wolves are wolves, and contrary to the opinion of some, they don't all have a rainbow coming out their ass.
He's very practical.
Yeah.
I mean, Middleton.
And I've went to his presentations, and you can tell he's got this stuff dialed in, and he comes across as very objective. But I thought it was funny that I'm sure the average subscriber to National Geographic magazine is probably someone who leans a little bit more towards hands off, let it be, the world's a big happy place, the wolf will ask permission before he eats the calf out, kind of thing, you know. And for them to read that was probably like, how dare you? So I don't know. Maybe I carry too much baggage about the wolf battles of the last 20 some years. But
yeah, David Meach came and spoke at the University of Arizona once, and he said, all this business about wolves are going to eat all the big game is more religion than reality, and all this business about wolves are going to return the butterflies and the songbirds is more religion. Yeah, wolves are really in the middle. They're just wolves.
Yeah. You guys got that coming down the pike in Colorado, Brian.
Mm-hmm. We do.
Yeah, there's been an aggressive campaign to try to get Coloradans to want wolves back. And we just had a paper accepted, and I was working on page proofs actually this morning in one of the most prestigious scientific journals, Biological Conservation. And the title of the paper is The Perils of Recovering the Mexican Wolf North of Historic Range. And it talks about the problems of actually making southern Colorado and southern Utah a focal point of Mexican wolf recovery, and having them so close to the northern wolves, which we've already have come down to northern New Mexico and northern Arizona. And if those Yellowstone wolves, which are mid-Canada wolves, if you get mid-Canada wolves coming down and starting to breed in a Mexican wolf pack, you're going to have a genetic swamping of this big Canadian wolf, and it's going to destroy the Mexican wolf recovery program. So we need that buffer area of southern Utah, southern Colorado, void of wolves until Mexican wolf recovery gets up and we get enough Mexican wolves so that they're really not a small nucleus anymore. And we're going to eventually have interchange because wolves are amazing at this.
Yeah, I was going to say.
We can't have that right now.
It's like the restoration will happen now on its own. I mean, wolves they don't need any help. Yeah. They're like coyotes.
Yep.
Now that we're not poisoning them and stooping to extreme levels of management, they're going to be just fine.
Mexican wolves are on the way. They're not quite out of the woods yet, so to speak, but all those northern wolves, they're on their way. They're just going.
And I've heard a lot about this controversial Mexican wolf. what is it exactly? How does it compare to other wolf
It's
species?
just a small southwestern subspecies. There's been a lot of really intensive genetic work done because there's been claims that there's domestic dogs in it, and there really isn't. I mean, some really high intensity and really extensive genetic work has shown like 1 or 2% of the alleles are also found in domestic dogs. But at that low level, those could be genetic components, alleles that were common before wolves and dogs split off in the evolutionary tree at that level. So there really, for all practical purposes, is no evidence that there's any domestic dog pollution in Mexican wolves. They're gray wolves. They're one of them. They're the most unique subspecies of gray wolves because they evolved mostly in isolation in the Sierra Madre in Mexico and kind of bled up into southern Arizona, southern New Mexico a little bit.
What's their so with them coming from Mexico, what was their primary food source? I mean,
Coues whitetail. They were Coues whitetail, Gould's turkey, jackrabbit. They understand how good jackrabbit tastes. Research in coyotes shows that as you go south down towards the equator, as you go south, the coyote diets get to be smaller food items and much more diverse because coyotes in Yellowstone before wolves were killing deer.
Yeah.
So they're eating big things and a less diverse diet. And as you go down into southern Mexico, coyotes are eating fruit and more insects and more rodents and more rabbits and smaller.
They're amazing.
And so it just makes sense. They are amazing. So it makes sense that wolves really kind of the same thing. You have very northern wolves eating moose and beaver. And then as you come down, their diets get more and more diverse. And as you get into Mexico, you have the Mexican wolf that was eating cows, white-tailed turkeys, and jackrabbits and smaller things. And diet studies in the red wolf, which is that one in the southeastern part of the United States in North Carolina, their diets were raccoons and rabbits and small things too. So you get these smaller wolves, and they have just the smaller food items. And some of the environmental groups now are saying, well, we can't recover Mexican wolves in Mexico, even though that was 90% of their historic range. Yeah. We can't recover Mexican wolves in Mexico because there's not enough food there for them.
Right.
Well, they evolved with those species that they still have in the Sierra Madre. So explain that to me, how now they can't live in the place where they evolved. Of course they can live. They just have a more diverse diet. They don't have elk, but that doesn't mean they need them down there.
Huh. It's good stuff.
I think he wants to kill a deer in the morning.
I know.
I know. I really hope say that every day.
Yeah. Jim brought you the how-to guide of how to do it right here. I've been waiting to hand it off. He gave me this when he came in the door.
So that's right just there. A research report. The department did a Coues whitetail research project in the Santa Ritas, just north of here.
Everything you want to know about Coues deer is in that book right there. So if you read that tonight and you don't, and here's the even more
bibliography. That's the kind of thing you sit next to the toilet and you read paragraph by paragraph.
That is a monster buck.
I know that's not that's the unfair part about these research documents that Jim brought us. Mm-hmm. All the pictures are of these 6.5-year-old bucks or something. And I've not developed the glassing skills yet to
check that out. Check that.
Yeah, that is an old gold ring spotter there.
That's,
you see that?
Richard Ockenfels, who wrote that annotated bibliography right there at the Coues whitetail.
Oh, anyhow, folks, you're wondering if you watch Brian records his podcast on video. They can see, but we're thumbing through this, and we got like
that
a
multi-cam.
1980, yeah. Someone's got a BDU multicam.
Those are Army.
Yeah, those are from G.I. Joe's store.
The foam-fronted trucker hat with the blotchy camo from.
That's right, dude.
He's using a gold ring spotter.
But that research project was the 80s, the late 80s.
Dang,
really?
That's why
you guessed the right vintage, Brian. Late 80s, man, you were still in high school at that point. I have
camo like that in my closet.
I graduated high school in 1993.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I was working for the Arizona Game and Fish Department.
Yeah. I had moved to Montana, and I was already 5 years into the CPA world. Huh. 1993. I wonder how old these listeners are. Jim, we might be like old. Some of the listeners are like, Brian, you had some guys who were in their 50s on your podcast. My goodness.
Time per hour.
Yeah. They probably think every morning
Yep.
Brian's got to wake me up and give me my Geritol or something. Or we go out and we glass for deer, and Brian's got to open the door and hand me my walker so I can get out to the rock and set up my 15 by 56s. Speaking of which, is that like a standard medicine for Coues deer glassing, 15 by 56s? That's what Brian and I have been using.
The hardcore guys are using those. Yeah. I mean, I've always used 10 by 40s because I'm not that nuts, and I have other things I want to spend my money on than 15 power.
Yeah.
How many cougars are out here?
12.
Right here.
I was going to call BS on that one. No, seriously, like how many are,
We harvest between 250 and 300 a year statewide. And anytime you've got a good whitetail population, that you've got
down here in this desert?
Yeah, they're hanging around the foothills and the rim rocks, and then they'll make forays out here. There's not as high a densities out here, just in these rolling mesquite hills. But you've got plenty of whitetail. So we had some mountain lions around Tucson that had GPS collars, so you can actually see where they're going. And we had one mountain lion, actually, it was in the Santa Ritas, just north of here, the Santa Rita Mountains. And one mountain lion's hanging around in the Santa Rita Mountains, and all of a sudden it goes about 6 miles straight beeline east out into this grassland and hung around there for a couple days, and then came back to the mountains. And that dot where it came to was a water hole. We probably came out, snagged a deer, hung around a couple days, and back to the mountains. And so, they'll come out searching for food and then go back in. But normally around this rim rock and around the foothills, they a little better ambushing, as you're finding out with a bow, a little easier to ambush with a little topography.
Well, I'm going to take in this book here.
Yeah. And I would have brought you my book, Deer of the Southwest, but it was too wildly popular and out of print now.
So your book, what's it? What you would talk about that, Jim? What is it?
It's called Deer of the Southwest, published by Texas A&M University Press.
And it's coming back into print.
Mm-hmm.
And where can they get a copy?
Whitetail and desert mule deer in all of the Southwest, including Mexico. And Texas A&M University Press is in the second printing now, and it'll be available. And it's in their catalog now, their spring catalog, and they say available in March. And so you can check my website, which is deernut.com.
Deernut, not plural.
Yeah, deernut.com.
Okay.
And I do a lot of magazine writing, and so I have that website, and you can buy my book on the website, but probably more valuable is there's a link for other publications, and it's just free PDFs of a whole bunch of magazine articles, and there's a whole section on deer, and there's a section on bighorn sheep, a section on pronghorn, a section on quail, other critters. So there's a whole bunch of magazine articles I've written on there that you can go click on and download there.
Nice.
And then I'll reactivate the website once that book's available, and I'll sell the book off my website, or you can get it at Barnes & Noble and Amazon. It's available widely.
Where fine books are sold.
Where fine books are sold. Is it going to be all of my listeners are going to, because they know that I can't read real well, so they're going to say, do they have an audio version?
It does not have an audio, but this time there will be a digital version of the book, which we didn't have the first time. So that'll be interesting.
Like for Nooks and Kindles and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I haven't actually seen that product because they did it, but the advantage there, you can search for food habits, search for rut, search for keywords. Right. So that'd be pretty cool.
How long did it take you to make that book?
12 years.
Wow.
I did it on my own time. It wasn't part of Game and Fish. I sat, and that's where I got into the habit of writing from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And I was not going to, a lot of people just crank books out fast, and I didn't cut a single corner. When I worked on mule deer water requirements and whitetail water requirements, I just absolutely dug in and searched and got every single piece of information for Coues whitetail and desert mule deer and included it all. So it's not original research. It's all the information from Coues whitetail and desert mule deer just put into one, what I consider an easy to read format.
Yeah. Your desert mule deer down here, they shoot some really nice desert mule deer here. We've been disregarding them because we can hunt mule deer in so many other places, but I saw 2 mule deer bucks on my way driving in from the tire store the other day that I'm like, distraction.
Might have to do that now. I think they're easier to kill.
Yeah, they're a little easier to kill.
Yeah, and
I could use a little easier to kill.
they were in just really gentle rolling country with it looks like.
Yeah, that's the thing with the desert mule deer. In most of the West, the whitetail are in the flats and in the river valleys, and the mule deer up in the mountains. In the Southwest, it's flipped, where you've got whitetails up above 4,000 feet in the mountains, in the place where you start getting oaks, and you've got desert mule deer out in the desert grassland flats. It's really the opposite.
It's crazy.
Are these similar to? I mean, are these like an extension of the desert mule deer, the Sonoran mule deer they're shooting down in Mexico?
Yep. Same thing. Sonoran mule deer into northern Chihuahua, and then southern New Mexico, southern Arizona, southern California. Into Baja. Baja, they look a little bit different, but yeah, actually my article in the next issue of Mule Deer Foundation magazine is going to be the mule deer subspecies, talking about how they differ around. That's what I'm supposed to be home writing right now.
Oh, we're holding you up. Is there anything else that we're supposed to be hunting while we're here that we talked about, Brian?
Arivaca Lake used to have some of the biggest largemouth bass, but
oh, really?
That drain, that's no more. I don't know the status now, but it used to be the destination spot for big bass, even as small as it is.
Really? I've never been. I've got some bass by accident. I mean, when you're a walleye guy, bass are just like something you throw back.
Yeah, no, I covered a lot of all the animals you can hunt and then how to eat them with Hank earlier today. Yeah,
I guess we're holding you a long time, and I'll let Brian chime in any more questions he has. But I just want people to know how much fun we have down here and what there is for opportunity when my wife is home shoveling snow. I am down here sweating. Laughing
but
at
not
Brian,
very hard.
Laughing at Brian telling a story of his charge from a rabid Coatimundi. I laughed yesterday. I laughed harder than I think I've ever laughed while out hunting because it took Brian 20 minutes to get back to where we were parked in Glassing, and still his eyes were so big when he's telling this story. I'm like, this had to really happen.
My son was charged by a gray fox once and had to swing a tripod at it.
Really?
So that's kind of scary because foxes have kind of a high incidence of rabies, and you
yeah,
get an animal like that attacking you.
Yeah,
I wonder what's wrong with it.
Yeah. I mean, these Coatimundi, they have some sharp teeth, man. It's looks like a raccoon a little bit.
Yeah, I suppose he was rabid. Or just mad or horny.
I think he was hungry and he thought I was a wounded rabbit. He's like, I'm eating that. But I optifated him with my subalpine camo. He came charging at me. He saw that and he stopped. He charged again. He's like, what am I looking at? And just kind of froze there. But yeah, it's been really fun just seeing this place. And every morning when we go out, it's just beautiful. The sun's coming up, and you sit down.
Turns orange.
Yep, and the sun starts to reveal things. Some of it in shadow, some of it's not. It's just gorgeous. And so it is a special place.
Yeah, people come down quail hunting even in the poor years, and it's still a good quail hunt because of the weather.
I heard Ranella talk about Coues deer hunting on a Meat Eater episode once, a couple of times actually, and he's like, I just don't understand why more people aren't here hunting these deer.
Yep.
Because they're awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So if I come back with a rifle, are you going to think any less of me?
I'm coming back with a rifle with you. I mean, these things are tough. No, I asked Sam, Sam Soholt. So Sam, after being here and hunting these Coues deer for a while, he's like, I think some animals are made to be hunted with a rifle and some are not. He's like, these feel made to be hunted with a rifle. There's no doubt that killing a mature buck in this terrain with the intense alertness that these deer possess, there's no doubt that killing one with a bow and arrow is a tall at tall feet.
Yeah, you just walk through a saddle into a canyon, and they're sneaking out the back wall there without you.
It's like popcorn.
Yeah, it's amazing.
In some of this country, it's not real flat where the deer live.
Nor quiet.
Yeah, what I'm finding is where I've had the best luck is on rocky cliffs. Mm-hmm. So if they'll just bed below or near a rocky, cliffy kind of area, that's where I've been able to get close. Outside of that, on these rolling hills and stuff, it's tough. I have not been able to do it yet.
But you told me that your primary archery skill is your stealth.
It is, because I can't shoot for a dang. You saw that yesterday.
Well, I would challenge all of our listeners that if you come down here and shoot one of these with your bow, spot and stock, I want to know about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know how they did it.
Yeah. I want to see it on film.
Oh,
Yeah.
Prove it to me.
I know. Well, last year when we were here and I told people I was going to do it and I was going to have a camera guy follow me around, they're like,
Good luck.
you've never done that before, have you? And last year I did 5 stocks, and on 2 of them I got I got to 30 yards or less with a camera guy.
I was going to say that, I mean, as hard as it's been, it's doable. It's not like this is not doable. Mm-hmm. You know, we've come close. And the fact is, there's just been days where 2 days where I haven't seen a buck at all. Mm-hmm. So there's no stock to be had.
Mm-hmm.
And
if you're an archer in like Mississippi and you think you're a pretty good archer sitting in a tree stand, you need to come out.
yeah.
Fly your skills.
Well, and I think there's some, with the rut being like it is, we have not seen deer in the same place twice, really.
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
Where other places I might ambush hunt, like a pinch point of some kind, because I know the deer are coming through and they're cruising around, and man, I just don't see the cruising around kind of stuff, you know? So
Just kind of show up and then they disappear.
yeah,
Like
it's
some kind of gray ghost.
Well,
Exactly.
I can assure you, Jim, that if one of us are to arrow a deer tomorrow, at your office there in Tucson, you will probably hear the hooting and yelling and jumping around, high-fiving and backslapping.
Border Patrol will descend on you wondering what's going on.
It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. Hopefully tomorrow
Have you
is
seen
the
Border
day.
Patrol out in the field?
Oh,
When you about there?
lots.
Yeah.
I've never felt so safe in my life.
Right. Yeah, I was
Dude, we see
stalking-
Border Patrol every 15 minutes.
Yeah. Right.
When you killed that Cody today, that helicopter, that Border Patrol helicopter came buzzing right over us.
What about the jet?
Yeah.
What was that thing?
I have no idea.
Military
what that
kind of
was.
operation
stealth
area, so
plane?
there's all kinds of jet activity.
Yeah.
It was so low, I feel like I could have jumped up and smacked it.
Yeah. I mean, where Sam was on that knob, it had to cause the breeze as it
Yeah,
went
it
by.
did. I mean, it was like, this is a place, man. There's the all-seeing eyes up on top of the
yeah,
ridge
Border
tops.
Patrol has observation cameras.
Yeah,
Little
we were
cameras
coming
out of those
one night,
trucks and stuff.
And one of the guys had this $2 million truck, and we were driving out this rocky road. And he says, "You want to see it?" We said, "Yeah, pretty cool." And so he opened the door, and he's got one screen that's infrared, and another screen that's like a map. And it's actually active radar that's detecting motion. And sometimes it's cows, sometimes it's deer, and sometimes it's people.
Sometimes it's Sam, and he's waving at the
Yeah.
But the radar actually, when the radar detects movement, it automatically focuses the camera at that spot.
Yeah.
Automated by radar. And so and then he goes in there, and whatever the radar found, he looks into the camera, and then, it's a cow, and he clears it, like deletes it. And he just deletes these things that the camera's finding.
So when us hunters are out there walking around their cameras, he's like, damn, I hate
I
hunting
did a
season.
long stalk, about a 2-mile stalk one time, just through this desert mule deer country. And when we were driving out, Border Patrol said, "Where were you hunting?" And I told him where it was. He says, "Were you guys walking?" And I said, "Yeah, we made this big loop." He says, "Oh, we lost you right away. And then we even had units out there looking for you because we thought you were illegals coming across there. And we never found you." And I said, "Well, we had orange vests on.
I saw
They were actually looking for us."
I saw what I swear is an illegal today. Sam and I argued about it for a while. But just walking across those big flats after you guys left,
Really?
behind us, just walking and just like kind of jogging, like hiding from tree to tree, going along. Blue jeans, and like a blue T-shirt and a flannel, and
I'm sure it
looked
was.
absolutely. Yeah, it was Mexican, and it looked shady.
Huh.
So yeah, illegal alien. My first one.
I have a new appreciation for how bad things must be in Mexico. If you would walk through this country at night, all the things that want to pick you and prick you and grab you and cut you.
Well, water's an issue.
Nothing to eat, nothing to drink.
You're watched at every turn. I mean, these border patrol are everywhere.
Everywhere, right?
Rabid coatis.
We had one almost like border patrol was coming over the hill. Sam and I were a long way off up on this hill. But you could tell he caught eyes with us while he's driving over the hill, and he spins off the road. You could see him pull his binos up in the truck, check us out, and then he realized we were just two hunters. He was like, he spins out and drives off. Like, he's a little pissed off. We got him excited for a minute there. But yeah, I feel really safe down here, actually.
Yeah, it's
Very safe.
I mean, maybe you'd run into somebody. I don't know. But I would say that every day we've seen 10 to 12 border patrol.
Or more.
Yeah, or more.
I mean, Sam and I, when we were coming out, we saw like 6 just every 5 minutes driving past us on their way out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You went through the check station up here by the highway, probably.
Yeah, I drove through there. All they do is they just say, "You a U.S. citizen?" Yep. Okay, go.
Yep.
Well, if you weren't a U.S. citizen, would you tell them, "Oh yeah, I'm from El Salvador" or something? You know. But I don't know. I'm sure he probably profiled me and said, "Yeah, that guy talks like a squarehead from Scandinavia." I don't think he's from south of the border, but
Yeah, we're going to kill a deer tomorrow. Just wait and see, Heffelfinger.
is that a promise, Brian?
It's a prophecy.
You might want to change your luck and take a little hour nap so you're sharper for that afternoon.
Yeah, Brian is wore out. He's been going after it hard. See, I'm older than Brian. I have perfected the 9 o'clock.
The balance.
9 o'clock, I am out. I listen to my body. So I need like 40 minutes at 9 o'clock, and I get up. I'm good for another 2 hours. And then at noon, I love these oak trees here. They cast some great shade at high noon. And this grassland
anything in the
area.
shade is cool. Fairly cool.
I know.
That's what's really nice. There's no humidity in the air. So if you just find some shade, even if it's super hot, it feels so good.
You just need to quit denying yourself.
I know.
When your body says nap time, follow
Well,
Randy's
the body
clue.
hasn't been saying it so much. As long
The
as I
body's
go
been
to
saying I
bed
got
at a
better
decent hour, which right now it's gone past decent.
Past your bedtime. I know you're going into a fast fade here.
Dude, I have
It's so obvious.
I am such a bedtime person.
I mean,
But I'm like the first one up in the morning.
no,
Close
you're
to.
not.
Jonathan's
You are
up
not.
before me.
I've been up before you every morning.
No, you haven't.
I have too.
I get up and I go do my thing, and then I go back in the room for a while. And you come up it's a little bit later. Usually, I've already been up for a half hour
no,
at least.
at 5:45. I am there eating my raisin bran every morning.
You can't tell time.
Boy, there's a lot of things I can't do. But the point is, it's getting late, and Jim's
Yes.
got to drive home, and we got
Do
to
you?
get it. We
Going home, you're not going to spend the night here
I got
tonight?
to be in Phoenix at 9:30 for a meeting at Blackfoot Ferrets.
Well, thank you for coming, man.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
It was fun.
this will not be your last appearance.
Good.
Yeah.
I hope so. There's
So
all kinds of things that we can talk about.
yeah, we don't. The first time I have someone on my podcast, I don't like to get them in trouble.
That'll be for next time.
Yeah, we usually
But
leave that.
I'm going to go check out the Deer Nut,
Deernut.com.
deernut.com. I'm going to check out these books here, and then I'm coming back after you.
Good.
Jim Heffelfinger, the man, the deer expert,
The myth.
Jackrabbit Jim.
The legend.
Yeah, yeah. So next time I see you, since we've kind of known each other now, can I say, "Hey, Jackrabbit, how you doing?"
I use that moniker, but I try not to get it to catch on too much.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's only in Jackrabbit camp.
Someone's going to call the Tucson office of
Jack
Game
Camp.
and Fish and say, "Can I talk to Jackrabbit?"
That's right.
I got some deer questions. I
They
wanna
would
talk-
probably know. In fact, I was at a junior camp last weekend with my kids at Javelina Junior Camp, and we went up and they were serving food after we got in the first day of hunting. And I'm standing in line, and the guy says, "Are you that Jackrabbit guy?" He says, I gave my Jackrabbit book away. Do you think I could get I'm going to, tomorrow at Phoenix, I'm going to mail him a couple more.
Nice.
Well, thanks for listening, all of you Hunt Talk Radio folks. And Brian can give whatever farewell he wants
folks.
to the
Thanks for tuning in. Stay gritty.
gritty. Stay gritty.
Gritty.
Gritty. Brian is a gritty hunter, folks. I can vouch for that. Those of his listeners who don't get a chance to hunt with him, he's pretty gritty when he's out there. It's going to take a pretty hard situation to slow him down.
Yeah, I like to get after it. I gotta make up for lack of skill with determination.
Well, there's a lot of pleasure in watching you do that. I'll take a nap here. But the ironic part was that I've only done one stock on this hunt, and I got within 40
I
yards.
know. I am envious of your stock.
It's not quantity of stuff.
Yeah,
I wish that would happen to me.
You reach a certain age, and you're like, my time will come. There will be the right situation. I sit there and I eat peanut butter M&Ms, and Brian's over there eating his health food of whatever it is, doing burpees and calisthenics. I'm over there snoring, and he's got some of his mountain. What is that? Mountain Ops super shake, like.
Ignite, little energy.
And I'm over here, I got a platypus water bag that hasn't been washed for 2 years, and I'm just drinking a little bit of water.
And he gets a 40-yard stock on a deer.
Like an attorney that only takes those cases that are sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
It's hard.
The fact that Brian, my one stock got that close shows there's no justice in it.
I'm not going to do
That's the first thing that when we got done with that stock, I turned to Marcus and said, "Brian's going to kill us." If we didn't have this on film, Brian would think we're making this up.
Oh, man.
But
And the one thing I've learned with spot and stock hunting, and you just never know when it all comes together.
Right.
And there's so many times, like when I went after that buck yesterday, and I spooked them the first time, and they split, and I'm like, man, they're gone. And then I saw them up on this hill. I'm like, no, they're still there, but now they're a long way off, and I don't see a way to get to them. There was all these rocks and like trees and all this stuff to sneak around to get in position, and now it's just wide open grass. And I'm like, but you just keep getting closer and closer and closer, and you never know what opportunity might come.
Yeah, there's a lot of times where you see an animal, you think, I don't know how that's going to happen, but if I just start getting in that direction, you can make something happen if you just get into the game.
If you quit, you quit. But it ended up being I got to 40 yards on that buck on that hill, and you can't do that if you quit, and you can't do that if you don't go on the stock. But I would like for once them to just stand still,
look the other way
at 40 yards or less, not know I'm there, and let me just shoot the sucker. Just let me see it before it sees me. I had one at 30 yards, and I climbed up on this rock, and I knew he was right. I was right in his lap. I just could not find him. He disappears. They just disappear. And I climb up on this little rock boulder, and I know I'm risking it. I know it's like I could be getting exposed, but I just wanted to see just over this little rise. And I stand up and I'm looking out in front of me, and off to my right, his head pops up. And I looked right at him, and he's gone, and he's 30 yards away. That's sort of what it feels like every time. They just sort of, like for mule deer in Alberta, I don't really go after it unless I know exactly where it's laying down, right? And then you can kind of keep your eye on it, or it's right behind that tree. Here in this country, you kind of see him go into some kind of mesquite thicket, and you just know they're in there, but
Yep.
you didn't see them come out, and you don't know where. And
Try
they're
to get close
so
and find an
tiny.
ear or something.
They're so tiny. They're like that little dog, Shiloh, just curled up, tiny. And so, and you're not looking for horns here. Like usually, I'm looking for a tine for mule deer. Like,
Yeah,
where's a tine? This telltale rack. Here, give it up. You're just looking for an ear.
A white eye ring or
Yeah,
something.
it's different, but it's awesome. Come to Arizona, people. Come
Please.
check it out.
Just don't go where Brian and I are at.
Yeah,
You know,
Go
we
some-
want everybody to come here, but we don't want them to find
Yeah.
That's square mile.
We don't want them to find
Go
our
to-
Coatimundi colony
Yeah, that's right.
because we need some more.
We do.
After we ate that one tonight, we might have to shoot another one next year.
Mm-hmm.
But tomorrow you're gonna shoot a deer.
I'm gonna shoot a deer, folks.
Tune in next time, folks, to hear the end of the story. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks,
All right,
Jim.
thank you.
Despite our ever-changing, ever-indignant world with its growing ignorance of and indifference to the ways of the wild, I remain a predator, pitying those who revel in artificiality and synthetic success while regarding me and my kind as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood. I stalk a real world of dark wood and tall grass stirred by a restless wind blowing across sunlit water and beneath star-strewn sky. And on those occasions when I choose to kill, to claim some small part of nature's bounty for my own, I do so by choice, quickly, with the learned efficiency of a skilled hunter. Further, in my heart and mind, I know the truth and make no apologies for my actions or my place and time. Others around me may opt to eat only plants, nuts, and fruits. Still others may employ faceless strangers to procure their meats, their leather, their feathers, and all those niceties and necessities of life. Such is their right, of course, and I wish them well. All I ask in return is no one begrudge me, and all of us who may answer the primordial stirrings within our hunter souls, my right to do some of these things myself. What you just heard is a quote from M.R. James. We truly live in a world that is largely ignorant and indifferent to the ways of the wild. And although some regard us as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood, we have the opportunity to change the way these people view the hunter and the hunt. We can share our experiences and nature's bounty with those who employ these faceless strangers. And by so doing, we make a difference, not just for ourselves, but for the wild animals in the wild places we care so deeply about. Never stop sharing your passion for hunting and the outdoors. Our wild animals and our wild places depend on it.
This is Ty Stubblefield, and you're listening to The Gritty Bowman.
Gritty Bowman.